Previously on the dark side of Hey Arnold. Rhonda Wellington Lloyd. She's a 9-year-old student at PS 118, and she's known as a self-proclaimed popular kid. She is described by most as arrogant and greedy, often putting herself before anyone else and showing little empathy towards anyone.
Excuse me, but can we do a mirror check? No offense, but you belong in the back with the rest of the geeks. And take your geeky glasses with you.
Mr. Simmons continues to explain that the egg must remain with one partner at all times, and that the teams need to be able to make joint decisions and share custody. With that being said, Mr. Simmons passes around a hat full of names for each person to pick their partner.
Rhonda?
Okay, but I better get someone good. Great, I got Harold.
Come on, Rhonda. You know you like me.
Where in the world would you get a ridiculous idea like that?
Remember that time at the cheese festival when you jumped up?
Shh! I told you never to mention that night, ever.
I'm really sorry. I know it was bad that I ate our first baby, but I worked really hard to put the pieces back together and make it look like our Courtney.
Well, it isn't the same, but it is kind of cute.
In an attempt to make the best of the situation, Brooke decides to open a window and let some fresh air and sunlight in, but unfortunately she finds that their window has been bricked over and isn't functional. Her parents decide to go outside for some fresh air, and Rhonda takes a moment to herself.
Hi, Rhonda.
Arnold!
I heard you were moving in.
Don't be ridiculous. We're simply remodeling our house, and this is the only place we could find on such short notice. Frankly, I'd appreciate it if you kept it under wraps. If people knew I was living here, well, they might get the wrong idea. I mean, it is a dump.
Rhonda, I live here.
Yes, well, this is fine for an artistic type like you, but I have an image to maintain.
Later on, we see Rhonda trying to approach life with a new lens. She takes down the shower curtain to sew it into a new outfit, and she takes her brown bag for lunch and decorates it with some markers. We then cut right on over to school, where everybody takes notice of Rhonda's new lease on life. She gets compliments on her dress and comments on her fresh produce lunch. Then, after school, she marches right past the other kids waiting to get on the bus.
Hop in, darling. I'll drive you home.
Daddy! Where did you get this car?
Turns out our stocks bounced right back. We're rich again. Oh, and I bought you another scarf, Princess.
You'll need it when we go to Aspen.
Gerald Martin Johanssen. He's a 9-year-old 4th grader at PS 118 who's known for many things. He's smooth and charismatic, friendly, and generally liked by all. And of course, to many, he's known as a storyteller, holding many local urban legends passed down from generation to generation. He's a bold kid with a creative mind.
The bell rings and echoes in the empty hall. Then comes the bouncing of the red dodgeball. The cafeteria trays and silverware endlessly clatter. I stand alone in the crowd and ask myself, does anything really matter? Thank you.
From the start, we've seen him rocking a sick high top fade along with a red long sleeve donning the number 33 on it, as well as some blue jeans and red and white sneakers. On all accounts, Gerald's got excellent style. He's a well-rounded character who, a lot of the time, serves as a voice of reason, just as much as Arnold, but oftentimes in a different way. Where Arnold usually offers a very positive and optimistic outlook, Gerald leans a bit more towards the realistic and, as a result, more relatable outlook. Whereas Arnold tends to be quick to insert himself into a situation, thinking that he can make a difference nearly anywhere he goes, Gerald oftentimes will try to focus on himself, mind his own business, and sometimes even recommend that Arnold do the same. He's the kind of kid who realizes that life isn't all sunshine, rainbows, and happy endings. He's got street smarts and a pretty solid understanding of how the world works. oftentimes having solutions to problems that Arnold could have never thought of solving on his own. From rescuing Arnold from a burglary attempt after he fell in with the wrong crowd, or running the show at the flower shop while Arnold does the hands-on work. We've seen these two go through so many things over the years, and at the end of the day, they always stick by each other's side. With that being said, Gerald has always been known as Arnold's best friend. These two have been hanging out since they were in preschool. They're inseparable friends till the end, and in my opinion, they make for an excellent counterbalance to one another. Arnold is incredibly lucky to have a best friend like Gerald. Someone so kind and sensible, yet also able to look at the world through a different angle than a lot of his peers do. As great of a character as Gerald is, though, it's no secret that we've seen him face some struggle over the years. We've seen him struggle at home, we've seen him struggle socially, and, well, we've seen him do everything he can to overcome these struggles, if not, at least minimize the frustrations that they may cause him personally. Whether you realize it yet or not, he's a character that's been through a lot over the years of his life that we've seen through this show. And that's why today, on our nostalgic walk down memory lane, we're gonna deep dive into the mind and life of Gerald Johanssen. This is The Dark Side of Hey Arnold. To start this journey off, we need to go back to the start and lay some context. Back to an episode that would really shine a light on Arnold and Gerald's friendship and what it looked like early on. We're checking out the season 1 episode, Gerald Comes Over. This episode starts out at Gerald's house, where Arnold is over for dinner. The house is vibrant with life as Gerald's little sister Timberly excitedly jumps on her chair, accidentally hitting Arnold with a toy in the process.
Hey, Arnold, want to see milk come out of Gerald's nose? Just say the word booger while he's drinking. Cracks him up every time.
Liar! Booger.
Gerald's dad demands that everyone settle down as he begins a family discussion about the electric bill being higher than it was last month. He asks everybody for ideas to lower the family power usage, but none of the kids really take it all too seriously.
I don't see what's so funny. Electricity doesn't grow on trees. Each time we turn on a light in this house, it's like throwing money out the window.
Their mother punishes Timberly for flinging potatoes, but seconds later, her and Jamie-O are back at it, flinging food all over the dining room. We cut to later that night, where Arnold is preparing for bed, and Gerald is apologizing to him for his family being so much.
What do you mean, Gerald? I love staying over with you. Your family's fun. They're so normal.
Arnold, you slept over here a bunch of times, but you never let me stay over at your place.
Yeah, well, good night.
In fact, now that I think about it, I've never even seen all of your house. Every time I come over, we always go straight up to your room.
Arnold continues to brush Gerald off, attempting yet again to turn off the light and go to sleep, but Gerald turns it back on, saying that he's curious about all of the other people living there. Arnold tries to explain that they're kind of like an extended family of sorts, and Gerald says that he wants to meet them, insisting that he come stay the night over at his place next weekend.
They're not like other people.
Sounds like fun. I can't wait. Good night.
I don't know about this, Gerald.
What's going on in here? The way you kids waste electricity, you think it just came out of the walls or something. Jeez.
From there, we fast forward to the next weekend outside of the boarding house, where we hear the normal commotion going on. Grandpa Phil singing while Oscar and Susie argue. Meanwhile, Ernie is yelling about the bathroom being occupied. Approaching on the sidewalk are Arnold and Gerald, as Arnold is very nervous about his best friend staying the night at his house for the first time, promising him up and down that no matter what happens, everyone there is harmless.
Arnold, we I've been here before. Besides, how rare can your house be?
You've been warned. Grandma, I'm home.
Come on in, Kimba.
No, Grandma, it's me, Arnold. And you remember Gerald?
Don't try to confuse me, Kimba. I know you and Colonel Binghamton must be exhausted after your flight from Botswana.
Arnold and Gerald continue on their way as Grandma Pookie continues to hunt the fly that's in the kitchen. The two go upstairs, where they next come upon Arnold's grandpa.
That you, Arnold?
Yep, me and Gerald.
Come on up. I'm almost through in the office. Put her there, son.
Gerald and I were just finishing the tour.
Not so fast.
Arnold's grandpa reminds him that it's the first of the month, so he has to go door to door collecting everybody's rent. Arnold begs him not to make him do it this time, considering that he has company over, but his grandpa says that Gerald can help, and that way it'll get done twice as fast.
Do it myself, but I got more pressing business to attend to. Gotta go.
Collect the rent. Man, all I get is an allowance.
This is a little different.
We then cut to the first unit, where Arnold tells Gerald to wait outside. We only overhear the conversation from outside the door, but from inside we hear Arnold talking to a resident who I believe we've never seen before, named Mr. Purdy, as well as a chicken?
What was that?
What noise?
That noise.
What noise?
Was that a chicken?
No. That was the television.
But you don't have a TV.
That was the radio, Arnold. The radio.
Mr. Purdy, you're keeping a chicken here, aren't you?
Chicken? No, that's offensive. Oh.
Arnold brushes off the chicken and tells him that he's here for the rent, but Mr. Purdy asks him if he can just pay them tomorrow, to which Arnold agrees, saying that he'll come back tomorrow. From there, we cut over to the next unit, which is stacked with large bricks belonging to none other than Ernie Potts. Arnold approaches, asking Ernie for the rent, but he just simply asks them if they know the old Marquee Theater downtown. Gerald tells him that it's a nice building, to which Arnie agrees, saying that it's one of the most beautiful, and that he tore it down on Thursday. Now he owns the very last brick.
Every brick tells a story. I got a whole room full of history here.
Ernie, I have a lot of checks to collect.
You got a lot of nerve, kid, coming between a man and his memories. You know, one good sledgehammer to the cornerstone, and his whole place will come down like a ton of bricks. You get it?
Whatever.
You know, I like your friend here, Arnold. I like him a lot. You ought to go into demolition, kid. Here, take your rent, peasant.
After Ernie smashes a diorama of a building, leaving pocket change at Arnold's feet, he says that they'll just catch up with him another time. The two run out of the apartment as Gerald tells Arnold about how much that creeped him out.
Yeah, and he likes you.
Next up is none other than Mr. Smith. Arnold explains to Gerald that Mr. Smith is very private. He knocks on the door and a little keypad comes out where Arnold has to put in a secret code. From there, a safe opens up in the floorboards, and after Arnold unlocks it, he finds an IOU written on a piece of paper. He grabs it, and without much thought, they keep on going to the apartment of Mr. Wynn, who has seemingly been waiting for Arnold as he asks him if he's here for the rent.
Yeah, and we're kind of in a hurry.
Very good. Before I pay you, you will do 1 2 minor chores. Building maintenance.
But I really don't have the time.
You are a good kid. Good kid.
We get a montage of Arnold and Gerald, two 9-year-old kids, doing what Mr. Wynn defines as building maintenance, which I'd imagine should probably be done by a qualified adult. They paper walls, lay tile, and even do plumbing work. after all of that, he gives them each a dime and sends them on their way, saying that he'll have the rent tomorrow.
I know this can't be any fun for you. Why don't you just wait in my room? I'll do the last place and catch up with you.
Nah, I wouldn't desert you now. Besides, nothing can be worse than that dime guy.
Okay.
You're breaking the dishes again. That one came close to my fast foot.
Arnold knocks on Oscar Kokoschka's door to be greeted by his wife, Susie, who's packing her bags and saying that she's leaving because he's such a bum.
I should have listened to my mother. She tried to warn me.
Oh, Susie.
I could have married Joe Stevens, you know. He was an orthodontist.
You know I'm looking for work.
We'll find it at the racetrack.
I know that now.
Stand by for pottery.
But Susie, I work all the time, just not professionally.
Things boil over as we see the rest of the boarding house residents piling into the hallway and chiming into the argument between Oscar and Susie. Mr. Wynn says his cousin is a divorce attorney, and Ernie offers to help divvy up all of the property.
Arnold, you gotta do something.
Dinner, yes, sir.
Okay.
We then cut to the dinner table, where everyone is getting along famously, almost as if nothing had ever happened. Later that night, Arnold and Gerald are laying on cots on top of the roof. Just like Gerald did earlier, Arnold apologizes for his house not being normal.
Aw, are you kidding, Arnold? You get to hit people up for rent money, you get to bust up fights. Man, your house kicks.
Yeah, you know, you're right. Good night, Gerald.
This episode is a great one to start with in my opinion, because it tells us so much about Gerald. It speaks a ton about his character. Taking it from the top, the beginning of this episode showed us a good look at his home life. We saw that Gerald can live a bit of a hectic life at times, living in a pretty full house. He has an older brother who has tendencies to pick on him, and a younger sister who can be a bit much at times. His dad is constantly griping about the electric bill, and his mom is consistently breaking up fights. However, as hectic as all of this feels to Gerald, Arnold, on the other hand, loves it because it's so normal to him in comparison to his very unconventional household. As far as Gerald's home life goes, I do have to say that it was interesting for me to take in the fact that the oldest and youngest children were the ones throwing food at each other while sitting at the table. Meanwhile, the middle child is just embarrassed by the whole situation unfolding in front of his best friend. The way that they painted Gerald's home life in these early episodes is something that I really appreciate, especially considering how it would eventually evolve. Over time, we would see his little sister Timberly growing up a bit and getting older, and overall there would be a general shift in Jamie-O as his character grew as well. The point of this story, though, and how it says so much about Gerald, is that he isn't one to judge. When the shoe was on the other foot, we saw Gerald go to Arnold's house, and things were far more wild. I mean, within minutes of walking through the door, he had witnessed Arnold's grandmother hunting a fly like she was on a safari, and Arnold's grandfather drying his hands with a cat after using the bathroom. I mean, as off the wall as Arnold's grandma playing safari was, I just have so many questions for Grandpa Phil. I mean, did he have that cat in the bathroom with him the whole time? Did he bring it in there specifically to dry his hands on? Is there a litter box in there? I mean, that would explain the cat being in there, but still, drying your hands on its fur? That just, that's so awful and it gives me the ick. I don't like it. Not to mention Mr. Purdy with the chicken in his room? Like, I don't know what the deal is there, and, well, it's a little odd that we've never seen or heard of this guy other than this one time, but him having a live chicken in there is just so peculiar nonetheless. Then we got to Ernie's room. I guess concerned is the best word that I could put to the feeling. It's all just piles of bricks. I can't help but wonder if maybe Ernie is a bit of a hoarder. I mean, for him, he sees himself as a happy man with his memories. In all reality, though, he's alone in his tiny apartment with nothing but old, massive, heavy bricks, a desk, and a bed. I also can't help but find myself questioning how this would affect the structural integrity of this gigantic house, but to be fair, Ernie specializes in demolition, not construction or maintenance, so that's not really any of his concern. Ultimately, though, the real point here is that regardless of how crazy Arnold's house seemed in comparison, Gerald still saw it as awesome. He's not here to judge for a second. Both of them have a blast at each other's houses, and that's what matters. In all reality, they both found themselves worrying about their semi-dysfunctional families, when what it really comes down to is that every family is just different. No one's perfect, and, well, we all behave differently behind closed doors because we are all human. As it pertains to the bigger picture, though, I feel like this is also an excellent episode to begin with because it really shines an interesting light on Arnold and Gerald's friendship. It's not one where it's put to the test or anything like that. It's just one of those early on episodes that would play a key moment in Hey Arnold lore because this is Arnold and Gerald's friendship evolving and growing. This is Gerald getting a look at Arnold's extended family at the boarding house for the first time. Furthermore, this would also be the very first episode where we as viewers got more backstory on Gerald and his family. We had seen Gerald himself a lot at this point, but this was the first time that we had gotten to see inside of his house and meet any of his family. In that regard, this one feels like the perfect episode to set the stage and lay a bit of foundation of understanding for Gerald as a character. The thing is, though, this is just kind of the surface of all of it as it pertains to the Johanssen family. We saw all of 3 minutes in their house at dinner time. Just in that hectic 3 minutes alone, Gerald seemed pretty fed up with his brother and sister. Now, the next episode that we're going to check out expands a lot further on Gerald's home life and how he feels about living the life that he lives with his parents and his siblings. We're looking at the Season 2 episode, Gerald Moves Out. Now, this episode begins with Gerald waking up in the morning and rolling out of bed. He heads out of his room and towards the bathroom, which his brother Jamie-O has already occupied.
Jamie-O, I have to go. Sorry, Snot. I gotta meet today. I gotta bust the bod.
That's not fair. This is our bathroom. And if you don't open the door...
What are you gonna do, Squirt? You want a piece of this?
Ow!
Bathroom's all yours, dork. Thanks for the warm-up.
Later, Gerald goes downstairs to find his sister completely destroying one of his favorite cassette tapes. She says that she was using the pretty ribbons inside to tie up some books so they don't get lost. Feeling fed up with his siblings, Gerald goes to his mom, hoping for her to lend an ear.
And Jamie-O hammered me this morning on my way to the bathroom.
That's great, honey. I need to drop Timberly off for her play date. And don't forget laundry night tonight. Collect all your dirty clothes and sort them for the bin.
But, Mom...
Bye, baby.
Gerald, I need to talk to you about how often you play your stereo. Now look at this electric bill. Now in order to conserve energy, I'm allowing you to play 2 songs a day.
We cut over to Arnold's house later, where Gerald is venting to him about his issues at home, while Arnold is helping his grandpa put up a for rent sign. As Gerald tells Arnold about the issues, he starts fantasizing about what it would be like to have his own place. He imagines living at the top penthouse suite of a high-rise building that's named after him. Up in his suite, he's waited on hand and foot by butlers and maids as he enjoys a dinosaur movie and some delicious-looking cartoon pizza. The daydream fades back to reality.
I would definitely live the good life.
You do have a good life, Gerald. You just have to share it with 4 other people.
We cut back over to Gerald's house where he's contemplating everything. He thinks about his relationship with his parents, how much of a bully his brother is, and how his sister destroys so much of his stuff. He then hears Arnold's words echoing in his head, saying that he has a good life and that he just has to share it with 4 other people, which gives him an idea. We immediately cut over to Arnold's house, where Gerald is knocking on the door.
I'd like to speak to the landlord, please.
Huh?
So, you're interested in renting a room?
That's correct, Grandpa. Sir.
Gerald explains to Grandpa Phil that his current residence is just too small and that there's no place for him. Phil hears him out, but when Gerald asks him how much for the room, he excuses himself for a moment, leaving Gerald all alone. We see Grandpa go right up to the phone and call Gerald's house as he proceeds to explain the whole situation to his mother.
Hi, son? Renting a room? I'm sorry, but I don't understand.
Neither do I, but then there's lots of things in this world I don't understand. Like liquid soap, for example. But you know, maybe this isn't such a bad idea. Gerald seems to have some kind of problem he needs to work through, and who knows, maybe we'll all learn a warm-hearted, sentimental lesson out of this crazy turn of events.
Back in the living room, Grandpa walks in and he tells Gerald that they have one small room available, and because he's the short man's best friend, they're going to give it to him for a whopping 25 cents per day. Gerald happily takes him up on the offer, and he runs off to get his room set up as Phil laughs to himself about how much of a wily old coot that he is. Meanwhile, over at Gerald's house, his father just caught wind of Gerald renting a room, and he is absolutely pissed.
No 9-year-old rents a room in a boarding house. Where's my coat?
Martin, come on, relax. Maybe we need to give Gerald, a day or so. I'm sure he'll come around.
Oh, he'll come around, because I'm going to go over there and bring him around.
Martin, give him some time.
Where's Gerald?
Your brother's rented a room in Arnold's boarding house.
Cool.
Gerald's mom calms everyone down, saying that in a few days, they're going to go over there and check on him. Sure that by now, he's probably already thinking about how badly he wants to come home. However, we cut back over to Arnold's house, where Gerald is on his new bed, just happy as a clam about finally having his own space.
I'm glad you're happy, Gerald, but don't you think you'll miss your family?
Ha! Miss my little sister ruining everything I own? Miss my maniac brother and his sneak wrestling attacks? No way! The only thing I missed was not thinking about this sooner. Plus, I love this cool little bed.
We get a nice montage of Arnold and Gerald setting up Gerald's room together and enjoying every second of it. Later on, at sunset, we see Gerald walking out to his room with his dirty laundry in a hamper. He runs into Arnold in the hallway as he stops and asks him where he drops off his laundry. With nothing but a cheeky grin, Arnold tells him that the laundry room is downstairs. Gerald heads on down there, and he arrives just in time to walk into Mr. Wynn and Ernie arguing about whose lint was left behind in the dryer trap.
If I drop my laundry off now, how soon will I get it back?
That depends.
Depends on what?
How long it takes you to do it.
You mean I have to do my own laundry?
Yes, all the tenants must do their own laundry, and they must follow the rules.
Later that night, we see Gerald lying down to go to sleep. He clicks his light off, but sadly, he's up all night listening to the sounds of the city outside of his window, which he's certainly not used to. The next morning, after a rough night of sleep, he goes to the hallway looking to take a shower, but he's shocked to see that there's a big line for the bathroom, and of course, he is at the very end of it. Later on, as Gerald is shooing some cats away from his window, Arnold comes in asking what he's yelling at. Based on Gerald's rather monotone and flat response, Arnold is able to tell plain as day that something is wrong. As much as Gerald tries to deny it, Arnold already knows exactly what's bothering him.
You want to go home, don't you?
I'm sorry, Arnold, but this new lifestyle is not what I thought it'd be. I need a ticket to use the bathroom. I can't eat your grandma's cooking. No offense. I even have to do my own laundry. Look at me. I look like an extra in a hippie movie.
Why don't you just go home?
I made such a big deal out of moving out. I can't just go crawling back. Unless they asked me to come home.
Across town, we see Gerald's family preparing to come see him at his new place. As they're about to walk out the door, his mom tells them all that rule number 1 is don't ask Gerald to move back in with them. They all leave, and in the blink of an eye, we see them arriving at Gerald's new room in the boarding house. Gerald tries his best to curb his excitement to see them, while his whole family checks out the little room that he has crammed his entire life into.
Don't you miss being home, Gerald?
No, I don't miss it really. After living on my own, it'd be really tough to go back home to that old life. I know it's probably not the same for you guys without me around. You probably wish I'd come back home and, well, you know, come back home.
The important thing is that you're happy, Gerald.
Just like that, the family says that they don't want to take up too much of his time and that they better head on out. As everyone leaves, his mom turns around to tell him that if there's anything he needs, they're always just a few blocks away. Gerald stands there alone, taking in the situation that he's dug himself into, and later on, we see Arnold join him in his room. Arnold looks pretty annoyed as he sits there listening to Gerald complain that his family didn't ask him to come back. He reminds Gerald that he's the one who wanted to move out. He's the one who wanted some privacy and independence.
I guess you got what you wanted.
Young man, I have a problem with you. It's lint. You're lint. You're not following the rules.
I'm sorry, Mr. Wynn. I'll remember next time.
You better. I can't clean up after you. I'm not your mother.
I need to take a walk.
I'm not his mother.
Gerald goes on a walk down the block as Grandpa Phil watches him go, yet again laughing to himself about how much of a wily old coot that he is. As Gerald keeps walking, he comes upon his parents' house eventually. He sees them through the window just going about life as normal, like the happy family that they are. His dad even comes outside to take out the trash, noticing him, and he even says hi, and then just goes right back inside, as if he almost couldn't care less that Gerald is standing out there.
I'm gonna bust you up.
What's going on? I can't live by myself in a boarding house. I'm only 9 years old. Who knows what could have happened to me? Don't you even care?
Oh, Gerald, we will always care about you. We just didn't want to make you come home. You decided to go on your own, and we hoped you'd decide to come home on your own.
Okay, I'm deciding I want to come home.
Gerald, you are home.
Everyone else comes in, joining in a family hug as we zoom out, and the episode comes to an end. And, well, this ending is one of those that I feel really wrapped things up in a fantastic way. This is an excellent one for us to peel back more of the layers that make up Gerald's character and get to know how his thought process and emotions work before we dive into the nitty-gritty. First of all, I do think it's important to acknowledge from the top that Gerald's feelings in this episode, especially in the beginning, were completely valid. Like, day in and day out, his older brother just walks all over him, and of course, when he tries to stand up for himself, he's put in a full Nelson. We're gonna touch a lot more on Gerald and Jamie-O in a bit, but it definitely needs to be understood that having to live with his older brother constantly being like this is certainly enough to make him hate where he lives. When it comes to his little sister Timberly, it's worth noting that she is literally a 4-year-old in the 90s living in a busy house. She doesn't really know any better than to rip up cassette tapes and use the film as a ribbon to wrap up books so they don't get lost. If she was older and doing that kind of stuff, sure, there might be a different point to be made, but still, she's in that toddler mindset doing toddler stuff and not really knowing that she's causing damage. With that being said though, sure, yeah, Gerald's frustration is valid. It's okay to be annoyed that your little sibling destroyed something that you care about. However, the thing he should have kept in mind is that she's growing up and those accidental destructive tendencies aren't going to last forever. Whereas Jamie-O being a teenage bully is a choice, Timberly is a toddler, and well, a toddler's gonna toddler. What's really messed up though is the fact that Gerald tries to talk to his mom about it, just hoping for maybe some sympathy at the minimum, and she doesn't even halfway listen to what he's saying. In this moment, it's like she doesn't even care if the words coming out of his mouth are positive or negative because she's basically mom autopilot responding. The beginning of this episode of anything showed us that Gerald might struggle with a tiny bit of middle child syndrome, specifically in the feeling overlooked department. His mom completely ignoring him definitely implied that without a doubt. But for me, it was how immediately afterward she happily tells him that she has to go do something for Timberly. It just really gave us as viewers the impression that she was blatantly ignoring Gerald in favor of Timberly. With that in mind too, it could explain why he craved so badly for his parents to come to him and ask him to come home. He wants to feel like they care about him, and the beginning of this one really gave a lot of heavy feelings of being underappreciated and uncared for. I imagine what he really wanted was for them to ask him to come back and tell him that they were sorry and that they were gonna change and have a bit more respect for him. But the thing is, Gerald was at bare minimum wanting them to just ask him to come back. And of course, they couldn't even do that. In all reality, what happened here was, in the beginning, Gerald was treated pretty crummy by his siblings, and when he tried to talk to his mom about it, he was brushed off and ignored. So when he tries to take matters into his own hands, everyone around him, instead of thinking about why he would want to do what he was doing in the first place, decided instead that it was their job to teach him a lesson. Sure, Grandpa Phil kind of headed the whole movement, but literally everyone followed suit, even Arnold. Don't get me wrong, Gerald has a great life, and personally, I don't think moving out was the answer here. But like, the moral of the story was basically you should be thankful that you have a roof over your head, even if your family treats you like shit and ignores you? And, well, I guess that's pretty messed up if you ask me. Rationally, I think talking to his dad about his struggles may have been a good alternative to jumping right to moving out, but with that being said, Gerald is 9, and 9-year-olds aren't known for their decision making. I gotta say though, I feel pretty bad for Gerald because in all reality, he got some pretty abrasive and strict parents, but like in two completely different ways. His dad is more the traditional strict with the I'm gonna bring that kid back home myself kind of attitude. Meanwhile, his mom, as gentle as she is, isn't afraid to be abrasive in the emotional department. I mean, she saw how hard Gerald was struggling, and she planted her feet firmly in the ground, sticking to her plan and not asking him to come home because she wanted to make sure that he had to come crawling back to them. She put it under the guise of telling him that he made the decision to leave himself, and he needed to make the decision to come back on his own as well, but like, come on. Grandpa Phil, from the start, was laughing about how much of a wily old coot that he is. He'd straight up convinced Gerald's mom on the phone to go along with this whole plan, knowing that the ultimate goal was to teach Gerald a lesson the hard way, and have him come crawling back to his parents' house. I'm not sure which one frustrates me more though. Grandpa Phil for wanting to do that to Gerald in the first place, or Gerald's mom for going along with this old boomer's strict brazen parenting advice. And like, sure, call me a super soft parent if you want, I don't really care. My issue here is the fact that it shouldn't have been about Gerald having to be taught a lesson the hard way. It shouldn't have gotten to that point. Gerald's parents should learn how to get Jamie-O under control and make him treat his brother with some respect, and they should A, tell Timberly to ask a parent before she makes decisions like wrapping the books with ribbon, as well as B, tell Gerald not to leave his fragile stuff where Timberly can get to it. Of course, if they were hidden in his room and she'd snuck in there to get them, then that's a whole different conversation that they need to have with Timberly. But what it really comes down to is that if they could parent all of their kids in just a bit of a more strategic way, then one wouldn't be feeling like he needs to move out of his own home as a literal child. By all means, as a dad, I can admit that that's easier said than done, but shit, at least attempting that wouldn't have resulted in Gerald being taught a mean-spirited lesson by some old man who isn't even related to him. I do want to admit though, I feel like this specific episode could only work with Gerald. For a kid, he's got a certain level of emotional maturity that isn't blatantly glaring in this episode, but it's certainly higher than most other kids in this show. Now, with that in mind, I can't imagine if you swapped Gerald out for any other character and put them in this scenario that it would have ended as calmly as it did here. Worst case scenario, Gerald had a bad time and ruined some of his clothes before leaving. That was all it took for him to learn his lesson and come home because he has common sense and can admit when a situation sucks. However, let's imagine if we swapped Gerald out for a character like Helga, for example. A character who also probably hates her living situation. In Helga's case though, it might be even more dark, considering her mom's an implied alcoholic and her dad's a general brazen jerk. I don't imagine that Helga would have gone home any sooner than Gerald did. She would have toughed it out a lot more and pushed herself a lot further before she realized that it's time for her to go back home. Admittedly though, Helga would probably be better off in the boarding house than in her own house, so that might not be the most accurate comparison. Regardless though, on Gerald's behalf, there was quite a bit of stubbornness, but not as much as I imagine we would have seen from other kids put in that same situation. As far as Gerald's stubbornness does go, I feel like it's kind of a testament to the tenacity of his character to a degree. This one showed us that Gerald has a general sense of knowing when to give up when he's being stubborn, but it also told us that he's the type to try and change something when it's not working for him. That's some self-starter energy, and that kind of thing will take him far in life. Furthermore, I could be wrong, but I feel like this one was the first bits of side character progression that we would see in this show. A lot of other characters would have big defining episodes, then in the next episode we would see them go right back to their previous tendencies. Gerald, on the other hand, never really took his living situation for granted after this. There was still the general annoyance of it all and dealing with his siblings, but never to the degree where it made him want to move out. If there's anything else I wanted to touch on, it would be how much I appreciate the growth in Gerald's dad's character later on in the series. Early on, all we ever hear is him being a hard ass and talking about the power bill. He never even mixes it up and brings up any other bills. It's always just so one-dimensional and focused on the electricity specifically. Later on though, his character would be expanded and we would see him branch out and talk about more than just bills. We would see him going on fishing trips with Gerald and participating in family events at school. Seeing the way that Gerald's dad was shown in this episode, as well as the last episode that we checked out, it just really made me appreciate the more depth that they would give his character, as this was just so flat. Moving on from there, I want to check out an episode that expands a bit on something that I brought up earlier. The fact that we would see Gerald's brother Jamie-O changing over time. This next episode would show a very strikingly different Jamie-O to the one that we just saw, but furthermore, what happens to Gerald in this episode is just so messed up. We're looking at the season 5 episode, Gerald vs. Jamie-O. This episode starts out with Arnold and Gerald walking down the street while Gerald is telling Arnold all about his sick new bike. Right at that moment, we then see Jamie-O ride up on the exact bike that Gerald is currently telling Arnold about.
Jamie-O, what are you doing? That's my new bike.
Yeah, well, easy come, easy go, little brother.
From there, we cut to Gerald telling Arnold all about his new room that he set up in the attic, which he's dubbed his official bachelor pad. But when he opens the door, he sees that Jamie-O has claimed this territory as his own. After that, we cut forward an unknown amount of days as Gerald has Arnold over at his house.
Today is the day. The day my brand new, completely official Pop Daddy t-shirt arrives in a minute. Jamie-O, you ruined my shirt!
So what if I did? What are you gonna do about it, squirt?
We then see Arnold and Gerald walking down the street as Gerald vents about his struggles with his brother. Arnold suggests that he talk to Jamie-O and try to level with him, but Gerald says that he's more of the puff out his chest kind of guy, not so much of a talker.
Oh, why can't I, just for once, have something of my own? Something that Jamie-O can't take from me.
Hi. I'm Chloe. I just moved in next door. Can I borrow a cup of sugar?
I'm Arnold, and that's Gerald. I'm sure there's some sugar inside.
Yeah, the sugar's inside.
Arnold drags Gerald inside as he's on another planet. Once they're inside, Arnold asks him what's going on, and Gerald says that he's head over heels for the new next-door neighbor. Arnold points out that she's years older than they are, but Gerald doesn't let that stop him from shooting his shot.
Not doing anything tonight. I was thinking maybe we could hang out, maybe get a bite to eat.
Hey, loser, I'm glad I caught you.
Hot clown, Jamie-O.
You know why? Because I wanted to wish you a nice trip. Nice trip. Oh, kill me.
That was my jerky brother, Jamie-O. Feel free to ignore him. So as I was saying, you think you might want to go out? We could get pizza.
I love to get food with you, Gerald. Only how about we eat in at your house instead? You know, so I can get to know your whole family.
We cut to later that night where Gerald is dressed his best and dolled up for Chloe, who's arriving right at that exact moment. He walks her to the table and explains that their parents are out tonight at their underwater belly dancing class. As she's completely smitten with Jamie-O, Gerald goes to get the dinner that he prepared.
So, Jamie-O, I see you're really into personal grooming. I have to say, I really like that in a guy.
That's great. Yo, little brother, get the lead out, would you? Starving here.
Voila! Scrambled eggs with cheese, wheat toast, and french fries. My specialty.
French fries? For breakfast?
It's dinner, Timberly. Jamie-O!
What?
Jamie-O continues scarfing down the french fries, and Timberly spills juice on the table. All the while, Gerald is doing everything he can to make a good impression on Chloe, who really just wants nothing to do with him. Later on, we see the two of them sitting together on the couch.
You're positive you don't want to go out and see a movie?
Uh-huh. I'd much rather stay in and watch one on TV.
Well, today must be your lucky day, because Alien Dwarf Clown 6 is just getting started.
Sounds great. Why don't you go grab us a snack before we really get into it? So, Jamie-O, it just so happens that I like fine literature, too.
Whatever.
Chloe keeps trying to flirt with Jamie-O behind Gerald's back, but he continues to ignore her. Days later, though, we see Gerald and her rollerblading together when she loses control on purpose and crashes onto the hood of Jamie-O's car while he's working on it. She asks Gerald to go get her a helmet, knowing that when he goes to get it, she'll get a few minutes alone with Jamie-O.
I like cars too, and I also like boys who like cars, especially ones as cute as you.
Say what?
I like you, Jamie-O, and I think you're really cute.
What are you talking about? You're in junior high.
So?
So, there's no way I'd ever be interested in you. And besides, I thought you liked Gerald.
Well, I do like Gerald, but he's only a kid, you know. And well, the truth is, I've just been hanging out with him so I can be around you. Trust me, Jamie-O. Once you get to know me, you'll like me back. I'm very mature for my age.
Jamie-O is firm with her, saying that it's not going to happen, but she argues with him, saying that she isn't going to give up easily. Suddenly, Gerald comes back with the helmet that she asked for, but Chloe says that she just remembered she has to help her mom with something, so she can't stay. She says bye to Jamie O and skates off without saying anything further to Gerald. As soon as she's gone, Jamie O tells Gerald that they gotta talk about Chloe.
She is trouble, man. She's just using you. She doesn't really like you, bro. I'm sorry.
Gerald starts getting really upset at Jamie O, and he ends up accusing him of trying to steal Chloe from him, just like he stole his bike, bedroom, and his t-shirt.
Gerald, this isn't like those other things, man. This is serious.
I gotta actually believe a word you say.
But I'm telling you the truth. I swear.
Just stay out of my way, Jamie-O. And keep away from Chloe, too, if you know what's good for you.
We cut to later on where Gerald is at the batting cages with Arnold, telling him about what Jamie-O is doing. Arnold asks if he's considered whether or not Jamie-O could be telling the truth, and Gerald says that there's no way that Chloe would ever do something that mean, citing that Jamie-O, on the other hand, hates when Gerald has something that he doesn't. After that, we cut to Gerald's house on an afternoon where him and Chloe are hanging out in his bedroom and playing video games. They stop for a moment so that Gerald can go to the bathroom, and Chloe's exact words are that she'll wait right there for him. However, as soon as Gerald leaves the room, she goes right out the door, down the hallway, and into Jamie-O's room.
What do you think?
Hey, take that off right now.
Why? Don't you think it looks good on me?
Yeah, it looks great on you.
Looks great on her, huh?
Wait a minute, little brother. This is not what you think.
Yeah, right. Come on, Chloe.
Later on, we see Gerald and Chloe playing ping pong together. Chloe scores a point on Gerald, and before they can start the next round, Gerald has to go answer the phone. Just like before, as soon as he leaves the room, Chloe goes to find Jamie-O, who's exercising.
Help! Get it off of me!
You quit sneaking up on me and quit acting stupid. That barbell only weighs 4 pounds.
But I can't lift it. I swear.
What did I do to deserve this?
Jamie-O, what are you doing, huh? Trying to kiss her?
No! Wait a minute, little brother. You got it all wrong.
I'm really sorry, Chloe.
From there, we see Chloe and Gerald outside as she's bouncing on a pogo stick. When the Jolly Ollie man drives by, Gerald decides that he's gonna go get them a couple of ice creams, and of course, right when he leaves, Chloe goes to find Jamie-O. She sees him washing his car nearby, so she purposefully falls and pretends that she hurt her ankle.
I know I may look stupid, but I am not falling for the same trick twice.
But I'm telling the truth this time. Oh, it hurts. The pain.
Fine.
Jamie-O, put Chloe down, right now.
But she sprained her ankle.
Yeah, sure she did.
Fine. You want her down? I'll put her down.
Well, that's it, big brother. That is the last straw. Me and you, right now. Let's go.
Jamie-O tells Gerald that he's not going to fight him, but Gerald says that he's not giving him a choice. He tells Jamie-O that he's tired of him taking everything from him and that he's not going to let him take Chloe. Still, Jamie-O refuses to take part in any of this, saying that it's stupid and that he would just pummel Gerald. Gerald, however, is pretty much seeing red at this point, so he naturally throws a punch that Jamie-O easily catches and twists, bringing Gerald to his knees. In a fit of rage, Gerald then decides to kick at his older brother, which yet again Jamie-O catches and tosses him backward, but in the process, his shirt that he stole from Gerald gets ripped. That pushes Jamie-O over the edge, and he decides that if Gerald wants a fight, then he's gonna get one.
You're a dead man.
Wait, stop! Don't fight over me! Gerald, I appreciate what you're doing. It's really sweet, but you've got to stop. It's just not worth it. I don't like you the way you like me.
You don't?
It's just that you're 9, and I'm looking for someone older. I've just been hanging out with you so I can spend time with Jamie-O, even though it's pretty obvious he doesn't want to spend time with me. Anyway, I'm really sorry.
With his feelings understandably hurt, Gerald runs inside of the house as Jamie-O tells Chloe that he hopes she's happy. Inside, we see Gerald standing in his room, staring out the window. Jamie O comes in to check on him, and Gerald immediately apologizes for not believing him about Chloe and listening when he tried to warn him. However, Jamie O surprisingly tells him not to be sorry.
I was thinking, and all that stuff you said about me was true. I am always taking things from you, and, well, I'm sorry.
You are?
Yeah, and so from now on, I'm gonna try to be a better brother, and I'm gonna try and bug you a little less often.
Really?
Really. Otherwise, you might try to fight me in public again and make an even bigger fool out of yourself than you did today.
The next day, we see Gerald in his kitchen with Arnold telling him about everything that happened and how he's actually pretty thankful that him and Jamie O actually worked things out between them. Just then, though, we see Jamie O sneaking up from behind and stealing the slice of pie that Gerald just sat down to eat as the episode comes to an end. Now, first of all, you guys, we have to talk about Chloe. This girl is absolute trash and doesn't even try to hide it. Well, other than from Gerald, the one person here who actually likes her and sees the good in her. This episode made me feel so awful for Gerald. Here he was thinking that he was getting this girl's attention, however, she's just using him. It's just so icky. I gotta say though, even more icky than the manipulation tactics was when she finally did get direct with Jamie O. She full-blown told him that she liked him, and he straight up shot her down. He said, nope, not interested. Like, even if my brother didn't like you, no way. Yet, she took it upon herself to tell him that she's not going to take no for an answer. Then, she, on multiple occasions, puts herself in situations where she gets super close to Jamie O or gets him to pick her up. It just comes across so forceful on her part. What really bugs me about this too is that you can tell plain as day that she didn't think her plan all the way through. Like, okay, let's say that Jamie O fell into her trap and bought into her advances. Was she just gonna keep pursuing this behind Gerald's back? I mean, she knew good and well that this was gonna really hurt his feelings. When did she plan on revealing it to him? In all reality, all of this says a lot about what kind of person that she is. However, it also told us a lot about what kind of person that Jamie O is. This told us that he takes his little brother's feelings seriously in some ways. Like brothers do, he's going to bully him and he's going to walk all over him at times, but he's not going to play with his emotions by getting involved with a girl that he's interested in, especially not one that's years younger than he is. With that being said though, this one certainly taught Jamie O that his actions have an effect on Gerald. I mean, because of how Jamie O has always been, Gerald assumed by default that he was lying about Chloe. He assumed as soon as Jamie O said something negative about her that it was about him trying to steal her from him. The reason for that, of course, is the history of shitty behavior towards Gerald on his brother's part. Of course, he's going to assume the worst of his older brother because he's a jerk to Gerald all the time. This right here was an excellent wake-up call for him to be better to his brother. However, as you'll see soon, this isn't the first time that Jamie O has made that promise to Gerald. Speaking of Gerald though, for him, this right here is a lesson in not letting a crush cloud your better judgment, and more importantly, trust your brother when he says he's telling the truth and there's at least a slight bit of evidence to support his claim. Like, okay, I can get him being skeptical when Jamie O first told him about what Chloe said to him, but when Gerald had Chloe over and they played video games, it was clear as day that she was up to no good. Come on, man. Gerald went to the bathroom and came out to find her in Jamie O's room. Like, I can understand Gerald's response if he found Jamie O had wandered his way into Gerald's bedroom, but it's obvious that Chloe went out of her way to go to Jamie O's room. The same exact thing applies with the situation with her on the weight bench. It's almost like Gerald immediately assumed that Jamie-O had invited her there in the whole 2 seconds that Gerald was gone. More than anything, I feel like there were so many lessons in red flags in this episode. Chloe, as a character, was just such a walking red flag, and Gerald's judgment was so clouded that he couldn't see that for a second. Of anything, this episode showed us as kids what to look for in manipulative people, and it also served as an excellent warning to be mindful of having the wool pulled over your eyes by a wolf in sheep's clothing. In all reality, it's pretty morbid to take in the fact that this episode revolved around this little 13-year-old girl attempting to insert herself into a weird love triangle between a 4th grader and his teenage brother. Just so much ick on too many levels. If there's anything else that I have a major bone to pick with in this episode, it would be that this one portrayed Gerald having a love interest other than Phoebe. We all know that before this season, this show had spent 4 seasons straight pushing them as a couple silently in the background. Ever since really early in season 1, we've seen Gerald and Phoebe making eyes at one another, going into the tunnel of love together, and sitting by one another pretty often. I think this episode frustrates me in a way because it portrays Gerald falling for such a scummy person when in all reality, what I've always wanted was an episode dedicated to him and Phoebe. I honestly would love to cover their relationship in this video, but there wasn't ever really any episode that revolved around them. They were always a background thought, and I for one think that's a shame, and definitely a huge case of missed potential. Other than the random moments where like Gerald would have a portrait of her on the wall in his dream penthouse, or them getting close at the cheese festival, their relationship was never really shown to come to fruition. Implication was always the furthest it got. Yet Chloe got an entire episode and was never heard from again. As far as Jamie-O is concerned though, like I said earlier, this episode wasn't the first time that we've seen him make the promise to be better to Gerald. Next up, we're going to check out an episode that would expand upon Gerald's relationship with his brother and furthermore, Gerald's moral compass as a whole. We're looking at the season 4 episode, Jamie-O in Love. This episode starts out at Gerald's house, where he and Arnold are finishing up the dishes together. As Gerald is drying their final plate, Jamie-O comes out of nowhere and rudely throws 2 piles of nasty dishes from his room into the sink. He knocks all of the freshly cleaned dishes into the sink as well before he walks away, calling them losers. After that, we see Arnold and Gerald building a house of cards, and when they put the final card on top, Jamie-O comes up and purposefully bumps the table, walking away with a laugh. Later on that night, Arnold and Gerald are in front of the TV, munching on some popcorn and watching the season finale of the Z-Files.
Arnold, I'm telling you, man, the suspense is killing me.
Yeah, we've been waiting all year for this.
Hey!
Jamie-O, give it back! This is my whole year!
We fast forward an unknown amount of days where we see Arnold and Gerald walking down the street as Gerald vents about how he wishes he could have a brother that helps him when he's in a jam and takes him out for ice cream and other cool stuff like that. Arnold asks if he's ever tried to talk to Jamie-O about how he feels, but Gerald says that it's useless.
This is Jamie-O you're talking about, the meanest guy on the planet. There is no way he'll ever change. Not in a million years.
Hey, guys. Have fun at school today? Hope you're hungry for pie. Oh, Gerald, I did all your chores for you and I cleaned your room. I hope you don't mind. Whoops, gotta go. I'll catch you fellas later. Oh, I almost forgot. I got us all tickets to the Gladiators on Ice tournament next weekend. It should be a blast.
Gerald and Arnold are completely shaken by Jamie-O's behavior. Thinking maybe this is a real-life Z-Files moment, they watch Jamie-O leave, contemplating that something weird might be up. Arnold suggests that they follow him, and the two head out following his trail. They follow him until they reach Mrs. Vitello's flower shop, where Gerald is super confused to see Jamie O going in to buy flowers, especially considering he's allergic to them. After that, they see him head over to a candy shop as he picks out some fancy chocolates from a case.
I thought Jamie only ate protein bars and raw meat. Gerald, he's skipping.
The brother is skipping down the street. Let's go, man. We have got to get to the bottom of this.
Later on, Arnold and Gerald see Jamie O outside of the movie theater, which is currently playing a romance movie, something they see as far from Jamie O's normal choice of cinema. The two are completely dumbfounded, but not long after, all of their questions are answered when they witness a girl in a dress step off of the bus and walk right up to him.
Are you seeing what I'm seeing?
It looks like Jamie's on some kind of a date or something.
Look closer, my friend. Bonbons and flowers, paying for the movie, giving away his varsity jacket. No, sir, this isn't just a date. I'd have to say Musclehead is in love.
In love?
Of course, Arnold. That's why he's been acting so goofy.
Gerald celebrates, telling Arnold that this means all of their troubles are over. He says that as long as Jamie O has a girlfriend, he's gonna be good to them and that they can keep living large. Just like that, we get a nice montage of Gerald and Arnold kicking back and living the high life while Jamie O pays their way and takes care of them.
Thanks for the ride, Jamie O.
Hey, no problem. Anything for my favorite little brother and his main man, Arnold. I gotta go and drop off Sharice's overdue movies at the video store. But before I do, here's a couple of fives. Don't sweat the change.
Inside the restaurant, Arnold and Gerald dine on some burgers on Jamie O's dime, happily enjoying themselves. However, a moment into their food, they overhear some loud laughing, and Arnold realizes that Jamie O's girlfriend is sitting nearby and talking with one of her friends.
This Jamie O guy, he's unreal. Flowers, candy, a movie, all on one date? Ugh, I swear, it's like he's in love with me or something. How pathetic. Tell me about it. I've already got him running errands for me. Anyway, I figure I'll just milk him for all he's worth.
Arnold tells Gerald that this really doesn't sound good, and he says that they should go tell Jamie O. However, Gerald disagrees, saying that if they do that, he's surely going to kick Sharice to the curb, and then he'll be back to the same jerk that he's always been. At that, though, Arnold tells him that hiding this from Jamie O is pretty awful, and that even though he's a big jerk, he's still Gerald's brother.
After all he's done? Come on, Arnold. This is the guy who flushed your head in the toilet. The guy who stole your clothes when you're in the shower. The guy who put your hand in warm water while you were sleeping. As far as I'm concerned, we don't owe Jamie O a thing. He deserves whatever he gets.
I guess you're right. We should probably just stay out of it.
That's my boy.
We fast forward again to later on, where Jamie O is doing Gerald's chores, finishing up the dishes. Gerald asks him if he can wrap that up and take them to the mall, which Jamie O happily agrees to. However, when they get in the car, they have to all cram in the front seats because the back is currently filled with Sharice's smelly, dirty laundry, which Jamie O has been tasked with cleaning by 5 o'clock tonight. The boys all arrive at the mall, and inside we see Gerald and Arnold checking out a brand new game that they're both so stoked about.
Too bad we can't afford it.
Yeah, well, don't be so sure.
Hey, little brother. Find what you were looking for?
Yeah, only I'm running a little low on cash. You think you could float me, say, $59.95?
No problem, big guy. Jamie O's got you covered. It's funny. Could have sworn I had a few 20s in here. Oh, that's right. I took Sharice for a pedicure and a foot wax yesterday. How about I just write you a check?
A check?
As Gerald winks at Arnold, happily accepting the check, the look on Jamie O's face screams concern, as his finances are likely spread thin at this point. We quickly learn that isn't the only thing spread thin here, as later on, we see Gerald come into the kitchen looking to ask Jamie O to take him and Arnold to the batting cages. Jamie O is just frantically running around like a sim who has far too many tasks on his list and isn't able to keep up. The poor guy is baking a souffle, which he had to drive to 3 different markets to get the ingredients for, all the meanwhile ironing her clothes. Just then, his pager goes off as he realizes that it's likely the auto shop telling him to come pick up Charissa's car. However, he's panicked because he just realized that he forgot he's supposed to have her at her yoga class in 20 minutes.
Man, how am I gonna pick up her car, make her dinner, get her to class, and finish all this ironing?
Jamie, do you smell something?
Charissa's cashmere sock! Oh, man, look what I've done. It's ruined. How could I let this happen? I'm such an idiot. Charissa's totally gonna kill me. What am I gonna do, Gerald? What am I gonna do?
Gerald goes to answer the door to find none other than Arnold, who immediately tells him about how great the rose-colored glasses that Jamie-O bought for him are. He asks about the batting cages, but Gerald says that he hasn't even been able to ask Jamie-O yet because he straight up couldn't.
The guy's a total wreck. That Charisse is really working him over. I don't know, Arnold. I'm starting to think maybe I should tell him the truth.
The truth? I don't get it, Gerald. You said you don't owe him anything. You said he deserves whatever he gets.
Look, I know what I said, but, I mean, he's my brother, man. I gotta do something. Just look at him.
Charisse! She told me she'd kill me if I wrecked the sock.
When Arnold gets a peek at Jamie-O, he realizes that Gerald is right and that this has come way too far. He suggests maybe waiting one more day so that they can see gladiators on ice tomorrow, but Gerald says that it has to be done now, as he makes his way to the kitchen. He brazenly goes right up to Jamie-O and tells him to get up off the floor and stop blubbering because he has to talk to him about something important.
The other day, I sort of overheard Charisse talking.
Charisse?
Yeah, and the thing is, I don't think she really likes you, Jamie-O. I think she's just using you, to get stuff. I'm really sorry, man. Look, I should have told you sooner.
Why are you saying this, Gerald?
Because it's the truth, Jamie-O.
No, it isn't. It's a lie. You're lying. Charisse wouldn't say that. She loves me. I'm going over there right now, Gerald.
Through tears, Jamie-O grabs his souffle and heads out towards Charissa's house. We cut over to him arriving, and as he's on the porch, he overhears her talking with the same girl from the diner. She's bragging to her all about how she got Jamie-O to detail her car, among all of the other things that she has him doing.
The guy's a bigger sap than I ever could have imagined. I feel kind of bad for him, actually. Not. Hey, he should be here by now. Yeah, I hope he made plenty of souffle. I'm totally starved.
After that, we cut to later that night, where Gerald and Arnold are sitting on the stoop of Gerald's house, mourning the loss of Jamie-O spoiling them. All of a sudden, Jamie-O's car comes whipping around the corner like a bat out of hell. He parks and jumps out, approaching Gerald really heated.
I'm only gonna say this once, so listen up. It turns out that you're not the worst little brother a guy could have, so I decided I'm gonna try to be a little nicer to you.
You are?
Yeah, but just from time to time. When I feel like it.
Gerald asks if they can still go to Gladiators on Ice tomorrow, but Jamie-O says that he needs to scalp those tickets because he's broke. However, he does, rather threateningly, tell Gerald and Arnold to get in the car so that they can go get some ice cream.
Well, it looks like you got what you wanted after all, Gerald.
Are you dudes coming or what?
Yeah, I guess I did.
Now, this episode is one that I really appreciate because it was kind of ballsy, if we're being honest. We're talking about an episode of a cartoon on Nickelodeon in the early 2000s, and it was essentially showcasing an abusive relationship. The only other kids cartoon near this time period that comes to mind that came even close to that would be maybe Courage the Cowardly Dog in the episode about Mad Dog and Bunny. Plain as day, this girl, full-blown, doesn't even like Jamie-O. She just wants to use him for her own gain. She's basically looking for an assistant, and, well, he's itching to worship the ground that she walks on. It gets to the point where he's full-blown in tears over a sock that he accidentally ruined because he's overwhelmed by doing things for her, and she straight up said that she'd kill him if he messed up her laundry. Again, this is yet another lesson in red flags and things to look out for in people. But also, just like the last episode, a reminder of how easily big romantic feelings can cloud our better judgment. This is shown plain as day by Arnold showing up to the house wearing rose-colored glasses that Jamie O bought for him, as he's crying his eyes out in the kitchen, overwhelmed with his tasks from Charisse. The symbolism here was completely undeniable and straight up in your face. It wasn't even implied that Jamie O was wearing rose-colored glasses. He full-blown bought a pair for Arnold, who's trying his best to look the other way, like Gerald told him to. Can we please just take a moment to acknowledge how heartbreaking it was when Gerald told Jamie O what he overheard, and through tears, Jamie O told Gerald that it wasn't true, that she loves him, and that she would never do that to him. This right here is a massive trait of an abusive relationship. The victim defending their abuser and not being able to admit when they're being mistreated. They find ways to rationalize what's happening and excuse the crummy behavior that their abuser is exhibiting. On top of that though, I feel like this is even more emotionally jarring because we're not really used to seeing Jamie O portrayed in this kind of light. We always see him being this big tough guy who doesn't talk about his feelings. Seeing him full-blown break down and cry his eyes out over a sock when he's in the middle of literally doing all of this woman's chores was just so overwhelmingly sad. I do want to point out though, when it came to Gerald telling Jamie O about what he heard, he approached him with that same brotherly love that they're used to exchanging, telling him to stop blubbering and to get up off the floor. I feel like this right here, oddly enough, is an excellent example of knowing your audience. Gerald talks to Jamie O the way he's always talked to him because he's trying to break through to Jamie O, not this shell of his former self that he's become. You might hear Gerald talking so abrasively towards Jamie O and think maybe he's giving off some really Helga-esque energy, but in all reality, that's him trying to reach the inner, true Jamie O. He doesn't do this to be a jerk. He does it strategically. This right here shows a lot about Gerald's emotional awareness and his maturity. The way that he approaches Jamie O absolutely made perfect sense, and he knew that he would get through to the real Jamie O who argues, not the gentle, soft-spoken yes man that he had become. With that being said though, we have to talk about Jamie O's inability to say no here because it certainly plays a big role in Gerald's negative actions that were displayed in this episode. It's really interesting to think that this relationship brought out a very odd and previously hidden people-pleasing nature within Jamie O, which came out even before the first date. I mean, we all know Jamie O by this point. He's usually one to be rather brash with his feelings and look out for himself first and foremost and leave anyone else in the dust. His behavior in this episode is really unlike the Jamie O that we're all used to seeing. The thing is though, being in a relationship with someone manipulative will do that to you. That right there has the propensity to morph you into someone who you don't even recognize anymore. As far as Jamie O goes though, this happened before their first date. This people-pleasing nature can't be blamed on the relationship because he started behaving differently the day of the first date. With that being said, it could be more related to a deep yearning for love rather than being manipulated into acting that way. In all reality, Charisse didn't really turn Jamie O into a guy who will do everything you ask him to and never say no. He kind of started being that way before their date, and she was just a terrible person who took advantage of that in a very, very harmful way. With that being said, Jamie O's people-pleasing yes man persona could have come about as a result of finally finding some genuine happiness. We've never seen him this happy before, and, well, we've never seen him in a relationship before. With that in mind, it could be said that possibly this isn't a persona, and it's just how he is when he's genuinely happy. I can't help but imagine what it would have been like if Charisse wasn't a bad person and actually had a positive influence on Jamie-O. What if she was the kind of girlfriend who built him up and helped him with these tasks instead of putting everything on him? I feel like Jamie-O could potentially be the kind of guy who thrives when he's in a happy relationship. I mean, we saw the absolute best come out of him in the beginning. But sadly, the girl he was involved with was a complete wolf in sheep's clothing. With that being said though, this episode is an excellent reminder to be careful in not laying it on too strong with people. I mean, on the first date, Jamie-O full-blown gave her his varsity jacket and was showering her with gifts and just going a little too above and beyond. Gerald was full-blown under the impression that they were in love by how much Jamie-O was displaying such devoted behavior. Come to find out, A, that this was their first date, and B, she's straight up using him. Of course, that leads us to the elephant in the room. Gerald and his whole role in things here. Him and Arnold were the first people to find out that Charisse was using Jamie-O. Naturally, Arnold wanted to tell Jamie-O the truth to stop this from going any further, but sadly, Gerald saw this as an opportunity to use Jamie-O just as much as Charisse was. It was admittedly very messed up for Gerald to tell Arnold that they shouldn't interfere. To Gerald, on the heels of years of bullying and mistreatment, he saw it as Jamie-O getting what he deserves, and himself getting an opportunity to have some payback. This puts a massive magnifying glass on the flaws in Gerald's moral compass. With that being said though, he's always one to do the right thing eventually. It might take time to get there sometimes, but usually he comes to that point on his own. In this one, it didn't really take Arnold telling him that it had gone too far and that he finally needs to tell him. Gerald just kind of made that decision on his own. Not only did he tell Jamie-O, but he took responsibility for not telling him sooner. Of course, that doesn't by default absolve Gerald of his actions here, but all of this tells us that A, those actions came from a place of hurt feelings, and B, he genuinely realizes that what he did was wrong, and he feels bad for doing that to his brother. Ultimately, that right there tells us that in the long run, Gerald's head is pointed in the right direction. The next episode that we're going to check out, though, is going to take things in a bit of a different direction as it expands on Gerald's social circle as it pertains to more than just his best friend and his relationship with his immediate family. Like we touched on earlier, Gerald is known for having a lot of charisma and being a likable guy. He's known for being a cool kid and the keeper of the tale. Along with that comes a reputation to uphold. Of course, in a school full of kids who can have rather malicious tendencies, that can be easier said than done. This next episode showcases that rather well. Furthermore, in this episode, we learn about something that Gerald has been hiding from everyone for years now. We're looking at the Season 2 episode, Gerald's Secret. This episode starts out with the scene of Arnold hitting a sick jump on his bike while everyone around watches and cheers in astonishment. Except for Harold.
Oh, that's easy.
Looks like you gotta knock off a few pounds, big boy.
Just then, Gerald walks up and Arnold tells him to join them downtown while they practice for the big bike-a-thon coming up. Gerald, however, says that he can't because he forgot his bike at home.
He can wait. It's not like we're in a rush or nothing. That's okay. Besides, I gotta go paint my living room.
We just painted your living room 2 weeks ago.
Well, it's about time for another coat then. Look, I gotta go.
What's with him?
Oh, forget him. We got better things to do than worry about tall hair boy. Come on, let's make tracks.
Arnold goes the opposite direction of the rest of the kids, heading to Gerald's house instead. As he parks his bike on the side yard, Arnold sees Gerald through the window as he's sitting on the couch and watching TV. We see Arnold go around front and knock on the door.
Hey, I thought you went off bike riding. I figured I'd give you a hand with the painting. Where's the brushes?
Gerald heads toward the living room and he admits to Arnold that there are no brushes and that there is no paint. He sits down as Arnold joins him, asking him what's wrong.
If I tell you something, will you promise not to tell anyone? Of course, Gerald. You can trust me. I mean, you tell no one. You got that? No one. Not Eugene, not Stinky, not even your grandma and grandpa.
All right. I tell no one. Now, what's the big secret?
Okay. I don't know how to ride a bike.
At first, Arnold thinks that Gerald is joking, but Gerald says that he's completely serious. He says that his dad has tried to teach him before, but it never really went anywhere, and he doesn't want to try again. He tells Arnold the story of the last time they tried to learn. It was back when they lived in their old apartment. His dad had taken him out for a walk so Gerald could practice riding. During the walk, his dad caught up with Harvey the mailman, and as the two were talking, Gerald had his attention completely on the massive hill at the end of the street.
I just couldn't leave it alone.
Oh, fine. How you doing?
I still don't know what happened, but all of a sudden, the bike was moving. I forgot everything I had learned.
Gerald says that after this happened, he never really tried to learn again because he was scared. He says that at this point, he can't even practice because everyone will see him and make fun of him. Arnold thinks about it for a moment before proposing a plan to Gerald.
Tomorrow, just go meet me back of the old tire warehouse. I'll take care of things, okay? No, Arnold, I can't. Come on. You gotta learn sometime. But what if... Just trust me. No one will even have a clue.
We cut to the next day where Gerald is dressed in a disguise and meeting Arnold in an old tire yard. Arnold tells him to ditch the costume, and as Gerald gets ready to hop on his bike to get started, Arnold stops him, telling him that they need to start a bit smaller.
Are you crazy? What if I'm seen riding that thing? Oh, I almost forgot. Training wheels. You're kidding, right? You can't walk until you learn to crawl, Gerald. But what if someone... Look, no one's gonna see you, all right?
Gerald? On a little pink girly bike with training wheels. Wait till everybody gets a load of this one.
Across town, we hear everyone laughing as Harold tells all of the kids about what he just witnessed down to the last detail. As he finishes telling the story, Arnold and Gerald walk up, not realizing that everyone is talking about them.
Hey, Gerald! Wanna borrow my bike?
I gotta get home.
Well. The word's out, boys. Gerald doesn't know how to ride a bike.
Arnold stands up for Gerald and starts defending him, saying that he does know how to ride a bike. They question why he isn't going to be in the big bike-a-thon, and Arnold sets the record straight, saying that he is going to be in the bike-a-thon and that he's going to blow them all out of the water. They all continue to mock the two as they ride off, and Arnold apologizes to Gerald for the fact that everyone found out his secret.
Now I'm really in trouble. If I'm not at that bike-a-thon, they'll never let me forget it. Don't worry, you're gonna show up. But the bike-a-thon's in 2 days. Leave it to me. By this time tomorrow, you'll be riding like a pro.
From there, we get a nice montage of Gerald riding like a pro, as Arnold drags him in a wagon with the bike propped up on cinder blocks. The montage continues as Gerald first learns to keep his balance, then steering, and of course, a crash course in braking. And let's not forget a lesson in speed.
I'm really doing it. I'm riding like the wind. That was really good, Gerald. Man, who are you kidding? I can't do this. You know I can't. Sure you can. We just need to spend a little more time on breaking.
This is all your fault, you know?
My fault?
Why'd you have to say that stuff to Harold? Why couldn't you just leave it alone?
Arnold tells Gerald that he said all of that stuff because it's true. He can ride a bike and he can beat Harold. Gerald continues to be frustrated, however, saying that he's going to look like a fool at the bike-a-thon and that it's all Arnold's fault.
I quit. You can do this, Gerald. Don't quit now.
We see Gerald having a dream of his childhood. It's a bright and sunny day as his dad is pushing him on his bike and he's having a blast. He looks up and smiles at his dad, who's smiling back, when all of a sudden, his dad turns into Harold, laughing at him. The sky turns red and the surrounding fields of flowers turn into rows of buildings as Harold proceeds to push Gerald down a massive hill covered in mangled bicycles. Gerald shoots awake in a panic, yet the look on his face that follows is one that says that he knows what he needs to do. He gets up in the night, grabs his helmet, and goes out to ride. We see Gerald head right to the hill and bomb straight down it at the speed of light, deciding to face his fears once and for all. He gets scared a few times, but he remembers all of his training and makes it to the bottom like a champion. Just like that, we cut to the next morning where Arnold is arriving at the bike-a-thon.
Hey, Arnold, where's your little buddy Gerald?
Oh, he'll be here, Harold.
Face it, Arnold. Your little baby friend can't ride a bike.
Gerald can ride a bike, all right? Whether he shows up or not. I know, I've seen him ride.
Well, he ain't showing up, so you can just...
There he is! Ready to ride, Bubba?
We see the 10K bike-a-thon begin as all of the kids ride down the track. When they get to the uphill portion, Gerald absolutely pushes it and smokes every single kid, taking first place. However, when he reaches the top of that hill, he stops for a moment.
Hey, Gerald! Gerald, what are you waiting for?
I'm waiting for you, man.
The two boys speed down the hill, and despite giving everyone else a lead, they pass every single one of them on the hill like it's nothing. Eventually, Gerald catches up with Harold, and as they make eye contact, Harold's tires begin to shred under the stress of the race. Now, this episode is an excellent one to peel back the layers of Gerald on a social level as it pertains to his reputation with all of the other kids at PS 118. This one showed us a lot about these kids. If we didn't know it already, this one affirmed that anyone can be a target of bullying at PS 118. Even someone cool like Gerald who's just keeping to himself. In this episode, we straight up saw him just kind of minding his own business and trying to learn how to overcome something that he's been struggling with, but in the process, he becomes a target, ironically by none other than Harold. Now, it's funny because if you recall back to my Dark Side of Hey Arnold video about Harold, we saw Arnold do something similar for him. Except instead of learning how to ride a bicycle in secrecy, it was exercising to lose weight. Granted, this would occur 2 whole seasons later in the episode Weighing Harold, the point still stands. When it's Harold who wants his privacy, he expects it. But when it's Gerald or anyone else, he spreads the word to everyone, taking their right to privacy away. It's sad. This episode really did tell us nearly as much about Gerald's peers as it told us about Gerald himself. These kids can be extremely cruel. They're like a group of chickens who've recognized a runt or an injured bird among the flock. As far as Gerald is concerned, on the other hand, this one told us a lot about his ability to process traumatic events. On the whole, this one showcased him reliving the trauma of what he went through as a child, as well as his struggle to overcome it. As a part of the bigger picture here, there are so many factors at play. First of all, his family. We've seen how he lives in a household where his dad isn't exactly a feel your feelings kind of guy, and his brother would likely make fun of him for having any feelings at all. By all means, it would make sense that he doesn't really have the environment to overcome that fear, or even the avenue to talk about the fear that he's holding on to when we look at the family dynamic that we've already examined extensively. He had to do all of this on his own, with some help from Arnold, of course. This one, furthermore, expands upon everything that's great about the friendship between Arnold and Gerald. When all of these kids were talking bad about Gerald behind his back, Arnold did nothing but stand up for him. Arnold argued with all of them, saying that he's seen Gerald ride a bike and that he's just as good at it as they are. I mean, Arnold jumped through some serious hoops, planning to help Gerald in secrecy with hopes of him not getting made fun of by all of these other kids. Sure, it got to the point where Gerald was frustrated that Arnold was rallying so hard for him in front of everyone, but at the end of the day, Arnold was just trying to help uphold Gerald's reputation. Arnold knows just how cruel all these kids can be. His intention was to stand up for his best friend, and that certainly should be noted. Moving on from there, we certainly need to talk about Gerald's dream. Right out the gate, it needs to be acknowledged that the fact that he's having nightmares about this in the first place is without a doubt indicative of some subconscious trauma. This dream, in and of itself though, symbolizes his inner fears and the ridicule of his peers colliding inside of his subconscious. It certainly needs to be acknowledged how the dream had affected him from there. Gerald was at the point where he was ready to give up and was just frustrated at Arnold for hyping him up so much in front of everyone, as well as just not being able to leave it alone in the first place. After he had this dream, he had the choice to continue to withdraw and hide as he was, or he could use this energy to fuel his fire to keep himself going. Of course, we all know what kind of person Gerald is. He's never going to be one to let all of these punk kids who are easily swayed hold him back from being the best version of himself that he can be. In the face of their ridicule, he realized that doing nothing and giving up would just be proving them all right. In conclusion, if there were anything else that I wanted to bring up about this episode, it would be the part in the dream sequence where Gerald's dad, Martin, is pushing him on the bicycle and he ends up turning into Harold. This really had my brain going in a few directions and wondering what this could have been potentially hinting at. I can't help but wonder if maybe Gerald holds his dad accountable for what happened to him to a degree. I mean, Gerald going down the hill and crashing did come right at the time that his dad was distracted and talking to the mailman. With that being said though, it could be as simple as his dad turning into Harold, signifying the part of the dream where things went south and that's all there is to it. Who knows? This episode though did show us without a doubt just how shallow that these kids can be. Personally, I can't blame Gerald for wanting to hide his secret from them. He knew good and well that they would ridicule him, and would you look at that, he was right. Of course, it likely wasn't surprising to him, and he's seen these kids ridicule many others countless times. Of course, it likely wasn't surprising to him, as he's seen these kids ridicule many others countless times. As a matter of fact, this one wouldn't even be the first time that Gerald would be put down by his peers. The next episode that we're going to check out showcases scenarios of that same exact type of sentiment surrounding a specific thing that's completely out of Gerald's control, and ultimately would leave him questioning his own place in things. We're talking about the iconic Season 1 episode, Gerald's Tonsils.
We were sailing along on
This episode starts out with Mr. Simmons conducting his student choir as they prepare for their spring concert coming up in less than 2 weeks.
Class, that was wonderful, Gerald. Good job. Lots of enthusiasm on the finish. You really nailed those high notes.
Finally. Man, I've been waiting for Mrs. Simmons to give me a solo all year.
We cut to later on where Gerald and Arnold are walking down the street as Gerald talks about how hyped he is for the spring concert. They come upon Harvey, the mailman, who overhears, saying that he never misses the annual spring concert. He asks what they're going to be singing this year, and Arnold tells him that Gerald has a big solo at the end of Moonlight Bay.
Really?
That's one more reason not to miss it, Harvey.
Better take care of that voice, Gerald.
Don't worry. Nothing's gonna happen to my voice.
Just like that, we cut to a tonsil doctor looking down Gerald's throat. We learn that Gerald has had a sore throat multiple times this year, and the doctor thinks that his tonsils are the cause. He recommends that they take them out this week. Gerald panics, saying that he has a big solo in the school concert in 2 weeks, but the doctor says, on that note, they should just do it tomorrow.
I've never had an operation before.
Oh, it's very minor surgery, Gerald. You'll be in and out in 1 day.
Don't worry, Gerald. I had my tonsils out when I was 8, and it wasn't bad. I remember they gave me all the ice cream I could eat. You still do that?
All the ice cream you can eat.
We cut to Gerald post-surgery as his friends are visiting him while he's recovering in the hospital. Sadly, though he has all the ice cream he could eat, he doesn't really want any of it because his throat hurts so bad.
Too bad about your throat. So, are you gonna eat that? Oh, all right!
At school the next day, we see Arnold walking down the hallway as he talks to Phoebe, who's asking about Gerald's recovery. Stinky overhears Arnold talking about how Gerald's voice is going to sound different for a few days, and at even the slightest mention, he starts bringing up how he can sing Gerald's solo part instead. Thankfully, Mr. Simmons rejects that idea, saying that they need to hear from Gerald first before they consider replacing him. At that point, we cut over to Gerald's house, where he's sitting down and watching TV. He picks up the phone and decides to call Arnold. However, when Arnold answers the phone, he can't even recognize who it is.
Is this Harvey?
Oh, man, it's Gerald.
Right.
Arnold, it's me, Gerald. Gerald, your best friend, remember?
Oh, okay. If you're Gerald, tell me how many Purdy Boy mysteries I have in my collection.
23. And I have volume 7 and 11 at my house.
Gerald?
What?
I can't believe it. You sound completely different.
I do not. What's wrong with your voice, Gerald?
All of the kids join Harold in belittling Gerald, telling him that he sounds awful and that there's no way he'll be able to sing his solo part. This is made even worse as we cut to choir class, where all of the kids are laughing at Gerald, who's trying to sing the high notes that he's used to singing.
Oh, Gerald, that really bites.
Okay, class, quiet down. It wasn't that funny. Well, it was pretty funny, but we shouldn't laugh at Gerald's expense. Oh, darn that bell.
Class lets out and everyone walks out, still laughing at Gerald and talking bad about him. Gerald walks out behind everyone else, and Mr. Simmons stops him, saying that he's sorry all the other kids are making fun of his new voice.
New voice? No, that's my temporary voice. Everything's fine, Mr. Simmons.
You know, Gerald, if you're still recovering from your tonsillectomy, you could consider giving the part to someone else for Friday's concert.
Now, there's an idea.
No! I'll be fine. Hey, man, the part means a lot to me. Don't give it away to somebody else.
Gerald swears that he'll be great by Friday, and through the week, we see him struggling to accept the fact that his voice has changed. Meanwhile, the rest of the kids keep making fun of his new, deeper voice. Eventually, Arnold finds himself on Gerald's stoop, talking with him and trying to convince him that no one can even tell that his voice has changed.
Hey, Arnold. Hey, Gerald.
Hey, Harvey.
Hey, Harvey.
Whoa, Gerald, man, what happened to your voice?
What am I gonna do, Arnold?
Maybe if you gargle or something. Or
practice your scales.
We see Gerald gargling, practicing, and even breathing above an odd mixture of ingredients for a home cure. When none of it ends up working, Gerald finds himself standing on a bridge by himself on the day of the concert, sadly looking down at the water. Arnold comes up and joins him. He's shocked when Gerald says that he's not going to be going to the concert.
You're my best friend, and I appreciate the way you're always looking on the bright side. But I think it's time we both stop kidding ourselves and face the music. My voice stinks. I'm not gonna sing. Nothing in the world's gonna get me on that stage.
Come on, Gerald. It isn't that big of a change. It's big, but it's not insurmountable.
Arnold continues to pep talk Gerald, but he's just not buying it. Just then, though, Arnold gets the idea to have Gerald go back and ask his doctor about it. We cut over to the same doctor's office from before, as the doctor is examining Gerald's throat yet again. He says that Gerald's voice does seem very raspy even after fully recovering, and when he thinks to himself, he realizes that he's actually seen this in one of his patients before, many years ago. None other than Harvey. We see him and Gerald sitting down to talk about what Gerald's going through, and Harvey assures him that he's going to be okay in no time. We get a flashback to Harvey's childhood, where he went through the same exact thing as Gerald. He got his tonsils out, and next thing you know, kids were making fun of him in choir, and people didn't recognize his voice on the phone.
When things like that got me down, I used to hide out in my room and listen to my records by my favorite blues singer. After a while, I started thinking to myself, hey, he sings in a raspy voice, why can't I? Oh, it's just my tonsils, baby, putting me through them changes, yay. So remember, you're still Gerald. No matter what crazy thing your voice is doing, just sing what you feel tonight. Gerald, let me tell you, that's what the blues is all about. Be true to yourself, you understand?
Harvey walks down the street, singing his heart out, while Gerald looks at Arnold with a smile, saying that they should head to the school so they don't miss showtime. Over at the spring concert, Mr. Simmons is giving the class a pep talk while they prepare to take the stage. All of the kids stand on the risers while they question Gerald, saying that he's gonna blow it in front of everyone. But he completely disregards them, paying no mind to their insults. Out in front of the curtain, Mr. Simmons introduces the 4th grade class as they start their song. We see Gerald's parents and Timberly in the front row, with Harvey right behind them, and even Gerald's doctor, all just so excited to hear him blow everyone's socks off.
You have stolen my heart and gone away as we sing our moonlit song on Moonlight Day.
On Moonlight Day.
Yes, Gerald, you did it.
That's my boy, Gerald.
Yeah, buddy.
Backstage, we see Gerald walking by with his confidence glowing. He shares a really sweet, heartfelt moment with Phoebe, who talks about how inspiring he is, and afterward, Arnold congratulates him for doing such a great job, affirming that though his voice may be different, he's still the same bold kid that he's always been.
Ain't nothing to it but to do. I just had to be myself.
Hey, guess who I am? On Moonlight Bay.
Or maybe it's like this. On Moonlight Bay.
No, guys, no, it's more like this. On Moonlight Bay.
This episode is one that comes packed with a considerable amount of layers to unfold. I mean, come on. Poor Gerald had to basically get an emergency surgery dropped on his lap. As if that wasn't traumatic enough for the kid, he was left feeling extremely self-conscious about his voice, and a ton of kids seemed to just dogpile on him, all over something that he has completely no control over. This one certainly did make me appreciate Arnold as a friend, however. Arnold felt so bad for Gerald. though he knew there wasn't really anything at all that he could do other than support him and build him up. That right there is exactly what friendship is about. Sure, at first Arnold joked with him on the phone and poked fun at his voice, but as soon as Arnold learned that this was actually a soft spot for Gerald that he was feeling really self-conscious about, he immediately chilled out and took Gerald's feelings seriously like any good best friend would. I feel like over the course of this show, we would see so many important lessons in friendship shown through Arnold and Gerald, whether the episode focused on their friendship directly or not. Furthermore, this episode also was a testament to just how adaptable that Gerald can be. As far as his voice goes, he was used to singing high notes, so of course, when his voice changed, he kept trying to replicate that as it was all he's used to. However, when he started to use his voice in a different way, thanks to some loving guidance from Harvey, he was able to shine just as bright, if not brighter than ever before. This message is so important because it's directly about uplifting black voices. Just because Gerald's voice changed and got deeper, everyone was so quick to assume that his singing days were over. He's starting to become a man. Along with that comes a change to his voice, and it was super heartwarming to see a man like Harvey take the time to relate to Gerald, providing him with some reassurance and showing him where his voice was most likely to shine. This right here shows us how all voices are special in their own way, as Mr. Simmons would say. Speaking of Mr. Simmons, however, he totally sucked in this episode. He straight up laughed at Gerald in front of everyone and admitted to all of these fourth graders that he, their teacher, thought Gerald's voice sounded funny. Then, immediately after that, he pulls Gerald aside to be like, "Hey, I'm sorry your peers are laughing at you." Meanwhile, I'm over here like, Mr. Simmons, what about you, dude? What about when you laughed at him? Of course, he doesn't even apologize for his own laughter, though. From there, we see this guy do nothing but doubt Gerald. It gets to the point where this poor kid has to beg Mr. Simmons, saying that this part means a lot to him, as Mr. Simmons is trying to push him to give it up. This doubt even lasted until the actual moment of the concert, as evidenced by how Mr. Simmons said a quick prayer right before Gerald got to the finale. It was just so discouraging to see such an oats and granola kind of teacher like Mr. Simmons have so much doubt for one of his students. As far as Gerald's voice goes though, it's kind of funny because in all reality, being the first boy in your class to have your voice get deeper can tend to sometimes have the opposite effect of what we saw here. Like when you're a boy and all of the other kids' voices are getting deeper and you still sound very high-pitched in comparison, usually you're the one who gets bullied, not the other way around. With that being said though, this is the kids of PS 118 we're talking about, and of course, we all know that they have a pretty common tendency to single out any individual person who's different from the rest. I mean, it makes sense that they'd recognize Gerald, essentially growing up quicker than the rest of them, and their response would be to make fun of him. This is a bunch of fourth graders we're talking about after all. Now, moving on from there, I have to bring up Gerald's voice in the beginning scene where we hear the kids singing Moonlight Bay. Is it just me, or did this high-pitched voice seem extremely out of place? I don't know, you guys. In my opinion, his solo with the deep voice was a lot more fitting and sounded a lot better. But hey, that's just me. Who am I to say what sounds good? I'm practically tone deaf and my favorite music is toilet bowl sounds. Another thing I find myself wondering about though is Gerald's doctor. First of all, I totally recognize that this office is seemingly just for tonsils, But imagine, in this day and age, going to urgent care for a sore throat and then being like, yep, let's get you in for surgery tomorrow. On one hand, that blows my mind because I'm sure anyone who lives in even a remotely populated area in the US can relate to having to book out even the most minor of appointments for, at minimum, weeks on end because the schedule is consistently packed. On the other hand, though, it gives me a ton of anxiety just thinking about what that medical bill is going to look like. Good old American healthcare. On that note, I can't help but wonder if this doctor wants to get it done so quickly because he needs a payday. I mean, he's clearly got a lot of free time if he can just schedule a random tonsillectomy for the next day. With that being said, though, odds are he was just looking out for Gerald's best interest. With him having a sore throat, if they get his tonsils out now, the doctor knew he'd be fully recovered within 2 weeks for the show. If there's anything else that I wanted to bring up, it would be that brief moment with Phoebe that Gerald had after the concert.
Gerald, your solo tonight was inspired.
Time to go, Gerald.
This right here is exactly what I was talking about earlier in this video. This is an excellent example of how it was always implied that Phoebe and Gerald had a thing for one another, but it never really got fully addressed in the series. Like, even earlier in this episode, she was asking Arnold about how Gerald was recovering while he was still in the hospital. This would certainly show us that she cares about him and has him on her mind. However, I will admit I did find it a little odd that Helga of all people came to see him in the hospital, but somehow Phoebe didn't? That one just didn't make much sense to me, but with that being said, maybe she had something going on. Who knows? Regardless of that though, this episode, and the one that we looked at before it, really shows a lot about how one-dimensional the student body at PS 118 can be, and how even someone as cool as Gerald isn't spared when it comes to the mob mentality. With these kids, there is no gray area. Either you're their target at that moment, or you aren't. There's no understanding, there's no slack regardless of what you're going through. They don't care if you just got surgery or if you've got some deep trauma. They care about getting their cheap 15 seconds of laughter at your expense. I mean, on one hand, I consider the fact that at least they keep it fair and no one is off limits. But also, on that same note, it's like, what the hell, you guys? Can we not just have some respect for one another and chill? Next up, we're gonna dive into a later episode. This is an episode that I look back on and I ponder often. It's an episode that dives into a few aspects of Gerald's character that we've never seen before. We're looking at none other than the Season 5 episode, Gerald's Game. As this episode starts out, we see Arnold and Gerald walking out of the arcade, reflecting on how awesome of a day that they've had doing all of their favorite things. Arnold reminds him that they're meeting at the theater tomorrow to see a movie, and just like that, the two go their separate ways. The next day, we see Arnold walking back and forth in front of the theater while Gerald is nowhere to be found. As showtime approaches, the movie even ends up selling out.
Gerald, where were you? The movie's sold out now.
I'm really sorry. I got caught up in some things.
We've been waiting to see it for months. What were you doing?
Nothing. Time just got away from me. Hey, next weekend for sure. We'll see it.
Okay. So what do you want to do now?
Oh, hey, there's a book I wanted to take a look at. You mind going to the bookstore?
Over at the bookstore, Gerald grabs a book on the shelf for a role-playing game called The King Rules, saying that it's supposed to be pretty cool. However, Arnold says that it sounds like a dumb waste of time in his opinion. Gerald brushes him off, saying that Jamie O asked him to pick it up for him, and we see the two go to check out. The next day at school, we hear the bell ring as class is dismissed. Arnold makes plans with Gerald for them to meet at Arnold's house at 4 to work on their geography project. However, 4 comes and goes without a single peep from Gerald. Arnold calls his house, and Gerald is full of nothing but excuses.
I'm really sorry. I started playing with Timberly when I got home, and next thing I knew, it was dinner time.
But you never even called.
I know.
Well, I guess we have all the other afternoons this week to start hard on the project, Gerald?
Unfortunately, this week isn't looking too good for me.
You're busy every day after school?
I'm busy helping my mom with some things.
Well, maybe at least one afternoon this week.
Yeah, we'll see. I'll let you know. I'm tired, but I'll catch you later.
Okay, later.
Things start to get odd the following day when Arnold is riding his bike down the street, and he could swear for a split second that he saw Gerald down an alley with Wolfgang's friend Edmund, but when he goes back to check, no one's there anymore. He ends up asking Gerald about it at school, but Gerald is pretty quick to deflect.
Me in an alley with Big Gino and who?
Maybe I'm just seeing things.
I think you were, Arnold, because
King Rules. I thought you bought that for Jamie.
Yeah, it's his. I just have it because he wants me to copy a page of it for a friend of his.
In class, as soon as the bell rings, Gerald gets up to leave, but Arnold stops him, saying that he feels like Gerald is avoiding him. Gerald is pretty quick to deny it, as he says that he's just busy with other stuff, but when Arnold asks him to elaborate, he refuses.
Don't be so suspicious. Listen, I have to go. I'll call you tonight.
What was that again, King?
Hey, when the king talks, you gotta listen carefully.
It's all right. Now, once again, pawns, it is almost time to play the game. Red 330.
Arnold secretly follows Gerald, and he sees him entering a red shed with the group of kids. He peeks in the window, and he learns that not only is Gerald involved in this game that he lied about being involved in, but he's also seemingly the leader of the group, dealing the cards and acting as the head of the table. We learn that new to the table is Iggy, who's being taught the ropes by everyone else who's well versed in play.
This is not a game for the weak or impatient. You have to concentrate and be strong.
And one day, maybe you could be king.
Are you implying that I'm not going to be king forever?
Oh, no, king. I'm very sorry. I didn't mean that.
Watch yourself. You don't want to end up like him. A dungeon pawn.
The next day, we see Gerald leaving his house when Arnold says hey to him. However, Gerald brushes him off, saying that he's in a hurry.
Oh yeah, you're probably gonna go play the King Rules.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I know what's going on. You've been playing that game.
Yeah, I've played the game once or twice. So what?
You've really changed. You've been avoiding me. You have a million excuses whenever anyone wants you to do anything. That game has completely taken over your life. I think you should stop playing.
Look, Arnold, it's none of your business. You can't tell me what to do, and I'm not gonna stop playing the game.
Gerald!
Gerald walks off without any other words exchanged, and we cut to later that night where Arnold is talking to his grandpa, asking for some advice on how to handle the situation. Grandpa Phil tells Arnold that he used to have a friend that was obsessed with a game when he was a lad. Arnold asks if they ever patched things up, but sadly, Grandpa says that the game was more important to him than their friendship was, and on that note, he starts violently pummeling his bowl of olives at the thought of the resentment that he carries for his old friend. At the end of it, Grandpa basically says Arnold's options are to either never talk to Gerald again, or come up with an imaginary friend named Gerald so that he doesn't need the real one ever again.
So I'm just gonna have to come up with my own plan.
Ah, drat. I was hoping you were gonna get an invisible friend. Oh, I love having invisible friends. I think you'd like it too.
Thanks for your help, Grandpa.
Sure, anytime. Except 3:30 next Wednesday. I'm having a wart removed.
On the playground at school the next day, Arnold sits by himself, and he ends up overhearing Gerald talking to Big Gino about a tournament that's coming up this weekend, asking about the crown that he's going to be wearing. This right here gives Arnold an idea. We see him go home and start to study the book of the King Rules. He spends days practicing, and by the end of the montage, we see him writing a note that he slips in Gino's locker, pretending to be the king of PS1 19, and asking about the time and location of the upcoming tournament. Arnold learns that it's going to be at Big Gino's house on Saturday, and just like that, we cut over to Arnold's house where he's been practicing with his grandpa.
2 kings and an ace?
That's a royal sandwich.
Oof, what a silly game. But the thought of a royal sandwich is making me hungry. 6 unhappy uncles.
Wow, that's the best hand you can have.
Read 'em and weep, short man.
After that, we fast forward to the morning of the tournament where Arnold's grandpa is waking him up, saying he's got 4 hours to prepare. Later at Gino's, we see everyone socializing when the doors open and Arnold makes a dramatic entrance.
What are you doing here?
I'm here to play.
To play what? We're not playing anything. You don't know this game.
Oh, I know this game, and I've come to win.
It's up to the king.
Let him play.
We see the game go underway as players are one by one knocked out of play and placed in the pillory to be humiliated. As the king defeats players one by one over on table A, he's surprised to see that over on table B, the king is none other than Arnold. With all other players defeated, the two end up facing off head to head.
You should back out now, Arnold, while you still have the chance.
If you're in, I'm in.
It's your choice. Shovel the cheese.
3 in a row and Jack me nimble.
Those kind of lucky cards don't come around too often.
It wasn't lucky. I studied hard.
This would be a good time for you to quit.
Arnold says that he isn't going to quit, and we see the game progress further as this weird, overcomplicated play escalates. Gerald keeps egging Arnold on to quit, saying that he's getting in too deep, to which Arnold tells him to look in the mirror and see that he couldn't be in any deeper himself.
Look at yourself. You've been totally changed by this game. You're like a different person.
You're wrong.
You're gonna pretend you don't hear me.
You're wrong.
What is it about this game, Gerald? Talk to me.
Roll the dice or get out.
The two keep playing back and forth, and when the game comes to its climax and it's time for them to make their final bets, Arnold puts it all on the line. Gerald is completely shook, saying that he's crazy and that he's going to make himself the lowest of the low if he loses.
You're crazy, Arnold. You'll be a dungeon pawn. You'll have to devote the next 6 months of your life serving the king.
Hey, take it easy.
Come on, Arnold. Don't do it. Back out while you can.
No. If you're in, then I'm in. I've already lost my best friend to this game, and this is only a game, so I figure what does it really matter?
Come on, king. Finish him.
As everyone pushes Gerald, telling him to make Arnold a dungeon pawn, Arnold stands firm, asking him what it's going to be. He puts him on the spot, asking if he's going to put their entire friendship on the line over some game. Gerald sits there for a while, contemplating his options, looking at all of the faces around him that are telling him to betray Arnold for good. He looks down at his hand, and he looks at Arnold, as everything kind of falls right into perspective for Gerald.
I fold.
No, King! No!
Why'd you do, king? Why? It's mine.
I'm really sorry, man. I guess you're right. I can't really let it take over my life.
Yeah, you were pretty hooked.
I just want everything to go back to normal.
That's all I want, too.
As these two best friends walk down the alley together, Arnold asks what cards Gerald had in his hand, to which he reveals that, just like Grandpa Phil, it was 6 unhappy uncles. And as Arnold comes to the realization that Gerald could have completely destroyed him, the episode comes to an end. Now this one, oh man, this one. If you don't see what's morbid about this episode right out the gate, then you might just be more tone deaf than I am. There are so many dark messages being portrayed here under the guise of a simple children's show. This right here, first of all, is a huge representation of having a friend fall in with the wrong crowd. I mean, Gerald fell in with these kids that he doesn't usually hang out with, and next thing you know, he's lying and making all sorts of excuses for his rather shady behavior. It's a tale as old as time. For a lot of people, especially young and impressionable children, it's easy to get swayed in the wrong direction and fall in with people who aren't really looking out for your best interest. As a matter of fact, we've seen this happen before. In the first Dark Side of Hey Arnold, we looked at the episode Cool Jerk, where Arnold starts hanging out with Frankie, who's trying to convince him to partake in a break-in. Thankfully, Arnold knows right from wrong and doesn't fall into illegal activity, but ultimately, when Frankie tries to force him into it, it ends up being Gerald of all people who shows up to save Arnold from Frankie and his goons. Granted, this is a very different, yet similar situation. It seemed fitting that when Gerald ended up here, it was Arnold who came through to save him from this destructive behavior. And on that note, this episode is certainly a portrayal of living with an addictive personality, which, oddly enough, isn't something that we've ever really seen in Gerald before this point. He's never really been one to take things way too far when he has an interest. With that being said though, as out of character as it seemed, this episode is supposed to be one that tests his and Arnold's friendship, so with that context, it makes sense. There's a lot that supports this being a portrayal of addictive personalities too. I mean, if it wasn't obvious enough by the way that it overtook Gerald's entire life, let's consider the sketchy behavior from him in general. I mean, he starts acting completely different and is all of a sudden really distant from Arnold. He starts coming up with excuses for why he can't hang out or work on their project together after school, and eventually, when it becomes a pretty consistent pattern of behavior, Arnold confronts him about it. And Gerald immediately plays coy, saying that he doesn't know what Arnold's talking about. Then, of course, when Arnold mentions the game by name and says that he knows that Gerald's been playing it, Gerald admits that, okay, maybe he has played it a few times. Then, as you might expect, comes the extreme defensiveness. From there, though, all it takes is Arnold showing just a bit of concern, saying that he's worried the game is taking over Gerald's life, for him to straight up get mad and tell him that he's not going to stop playing. At that point, there's an interesting chain reaction that happens here. First, there's an immediate emotional response from Gerald. He has a very elevated reaction to Arnold, implying that he might have a problem as it pertains to the amount of time that he's dedicating to this game. Upon having that emotional response, it almost felt as if he dropped the whole pretending he's only played the game a few times act. Now, what really blows my mind thinking about this is processing how the human brain works. In all of our brains, there's an almond-shaped cluster of neurons located in the medial temporal lobe called the amygdala. Your amygdala plays a crucial role in your ability to process some big emotions, to be specific, anxiety, fear, and pleasure. It plays a role in triggering a fight or flight response like we saw from Gerald when he shut down and walked away from Arnold, and wouldn't you know, it also plays a massive role in addiction as well. The thing that was triggering that response was his love for this game that was making him feel good because he was dominating at it, and his inability to moderate the amount that he played. Like, you have to admit that this is actually a pretty solid portrayal of someone with an addictive personality. I mean, even the textbook conversation of lying about what you're addicted to, then admitting that you do it a little bit when called out, but when it's addressed that you might do it too much, you admit that you do it all the time and that you're not going to stop for anyone. Yeah, very accurate depiction, and it's interesting to take in because this isn't even something Gerald has control over. Anyone with an addictive personality can tell you that when your brain starts getting those happy chemicals, you're not really in control of whether or not it craves more of them. What you do control, however, is whether or not you acknowledge when those feelings arise, when it becomes a problem, and whether or not you take action. In Gerald's case, like we talked about, this game was causing him to completely overlook all other aspects of his life. He couldn't even get his school project done because all he wanted to do was play this game. Sadly though, it took nearly destroying his best friend socially for him to realize that he was kind of taking things too far and maybe had a problem. Now, one huge thing that needs to be recognized though, is that moment where Gerald realizes that what's happening is not okay. When it came to the point where he decided to stop, it took him looking around at all of the people that he's been influenced by and the things that they're telling him to do. He saw how ugly things had become, and he realized how much better his friendship with Arnold feels than this false crown does. In all reality, another odd thing that this episode showed us that we've rarely seen before in Gerald is his hunger for power. Gerald liked being the king, and at the thought of someone overthrowing his power, he got very defensive. This right here reminded me a bit of the episode where Mrs. Vitello gets hurt and she has Arnold and Gerald running her flower shop for her while she's away. We see Arnold playing the creative role and taking care of the flowers, meanwhile Gerald takes up a managerial role as Mrs. Vitello puts him in charge. As things progressed, we saw the power getting to his head as he increased prices through the roof, pushed Arnold away and fired him, and of course things blew up in his face when he was unable to deliver on some of the promises that he was making to his customers. What's really messed up though is whereas that one portrayed a power imbalance in their friendship as well as in a business perspective, this one came along with a taste of degradation. Like, how messed up is it that Gerald had this kid in his underwear acting like a dungeon jester? By the end of this one, we learn that the person at the bottom of the totem pole has to serve the king for 6 months. That right there tells us that the king is more or less in control of the level of humiliation that the lowest of the low faces. So, like, I guess what I'm saying is, did Gerald really have to make this kid be on his hands and knees dressed like that? This right here is yet again an example of how addiction can warp you into something that you aren't. This doesn't seem like something Gerald would ever do to someone. We've seen a few things that have been out of character for Gerald so far, but this one certainly takes the cake as the most out of character. With that being said though, who knows? Maybe this is one of those weird, obscure rules in the book that Gerald doesn't necessarily have control over. Still though, you'd think that as the king, he'd have the ability to put a stop to the humiliation. This is yet another one that does kind of make me question Gerald's moral compass, just a tiny bit though, because like when it came to Arnold being put in this position, he decided that he had enough and that he was going to fold. However, when this random side character is in that position, Gerald didn't really care. He thought it was funny. With that in mind though, it could be chalked up to another example of how whatever it is you're addicted to can certainly twist you into something that you aren't and make you do things that you wouldn't typically do. Gerald isn't cruel. He isn't one I'd ever expect to force someone to do something like this. If there's anything else we need to talk about in closing, it would be how this game wasn't even that cool. I mean, the way there's this whole huge book and everything made me expect some kind of tabletop RPG in the vein of D&D or Pathfinder. However, come to find out it's just some overcomplicated card game with like random names for certain card pairings and added in dice rolls for some reason. I don't know. I was kind of disappointed. I feel like this genuinely would have been a great opportunity to poke fun at the satanic panic and the way that D&D was looked upon as evil once upon a time. And, well, I guess the final thing that I wanted to acknowledge would be the way that Iggy tried to warn Arnold about the embarrassment of being Dungeon Jester. This right here kind of brings back some residual feelings from Arnold Betrays Iggy, where Iggy made Arnold humiliate himself in front of everyone. At the end of that one, we see Iggy holding on to a lot of big feelings of regret for what he made Arnold do. He promised that he would make it up to him. For me personally, that moment towards the end where Iggy tried to save Arnold, in a sense, felt like a slight nod to that moment. I mean, once upon a time, Iggy wanted Arnold to face the biggest level of embarrassment that he could possibly cook up. It feels like this was genuinely a callback to that moment, but with that being said, I could be looking too far into it. Winding down towards the end of the video here, we're going to take it all the way back. We're going to check out a truly iconic episode that would show Gerald getting manipulated into one of the most messed up situations that we've ever seen him get swept up in. Of course, we're diving into none other than the Season 1 episode, The High Life. This episode starts out with Arnold and Gerald skateboarding down the sidewalk when they pass a store that has Gerald's dream pair of rollerblades hanging in the window. They stop, and after Gerald tells Arnold all about them, he asks how he plans to pay for such an expensive pair of blades.
Earn big bucks selling a super duper wacko watch?
This is it, Arnold!
Aren't those earn big bucks ads kind of a ripoff, Gerald?
That super duper wacko watch is my ticket to the best blades in the neighborhood.
Later on, we see Gerald sitting at the table with his dad as he's saying that all he needs to do is co-sign and Gerald will be able to start making money. His dad suggests maybe a more traditional gig like mowing lawns or something, but Gerald says that's small change and that the big bucks are in watches. His dad is rather apprehensive to let him sign up to be a salesman, but at the idea of his son learning the value of $1, he decides to sign on the line. Just like that, we cut over to Gerald on a street corner giving a demonstration on how durable the wacko watches are. He claims them to be waterproof, which he has stinky proof, as well as indestructible.
Sir, why don't you try hitting a watch with this?
Looks like you'll be selling wacko jigsaw puzzles from now on, Geraldo.
You would be correct, ma'am, if that was a real wacko watch.
When Gerald puts a real wacko watch on the anvil and it doesn't break, everyone goes wild and buys out his entire stock. The next day, Gerald hops on the phone to tell Mr. Wacko that he needs another order of watches, and we get a look at the man himself as he tells Gerald that he's been accepted into the golden circle of top salespeople. He congratulates him and says that now he's going to be getting weekly shipments of watches directly to his house.
I'll have to talk it over with my people, but it sounds like a solid idea to me, sir.
Well, keep up the good work, son. Remember, there are no challenges, just opportunities.
Yes!
Another one born every minute. He'll get himself in a hole, and his parents will have to bail him out. Just like all the others.
We fast forward to the wacko truck dropping off some boxes to Gerald, who's standing nearby doing some thinking. He starts going around town with his box of watches, selling to everyone on the bus and everyone at the barber shop. As things seem to be going excellent for Gerald, we cut over to his house, where he's sitting at his desk, ordering a new computer on the phone. As he talks on the phone, a stack of wacko watch boxes that he has hidden in his closet ends up pushing its way out. He hangs up the phone and starts cleaning it up right as his dad comes to the door.
Hey, Daddy, what's shaking?
Well, it's about these watches.
I'm sorry, Daddy, I told you. No family discounts.
I'm covered, Gerald. Listen, this business of yours is getting out of hand.
Daddy, I appreciate your concern, but everything's, copacetic. Listen, I wish we could talk more, but it's sort of a bad time for me. So here's a card. Call me late in the week.
Business cards? When did you get business cards?
Gerald just kind of dismisses his dad, saying that he's got to go see a guy about some skates, and he walks out of the room and he hands $1 to his sister Timberly in the process. From there, we see Gerald just enjoying the high life as he goes to the arcade and plays multiple different games at once and proceeds to buy everyone ice cream from the Jolly Ollie Man. Sadly for him though, when it comes time to pay, the Jolly Ollie Man wipes him clean of every last penny. Gerald shrugs it off, saying that he's just got to find some new customers, and just like that, he makes his way over to the corner store. Gerald starts to feel a hopeless sense of dread as he realizes that he's seemingly bled the well dry. He finds himself outside of the store where it all started, saddened by the fact that he lost sight of his original goal and can no longer afford the rollerblades that he so badly wanted. Back at his house, we see Gerald on his bed when Arnold comes to check on him, asking if there's anything that he can do to help.
Here, buy all the rest of my watches.
Anything a little less expensive?
Don't worry. Tomorrow will be better.
Yeah, and you only have a few hundred watches left to sell.
Yeah, thank goodness for that.
Another week's worth of watches for you to sell, Mr. Johanssen.
Gerald sits there among the sea of watches, panicking. Arnold tries to tell him that he's an excellent salesman and that he can do this, but Gerald freaks out even further at the striking realization that his market is oversaturated. As Gerald throws himself down in a panic, Arnold says that he's got an idea. Just like that, we cut to Mr. Wacko's office where he's on the phone having a conversation with someone about how kids are such suckers. He's interrupted by a knock on the door as he hangs up the phone. He's greeted by none other than Gerald, who's come by to thank him for making such an amazing product.
Really? What's your angle?
Oh, there is no angle. With Wacko watches, you don't need an angle. They practically sell themselves. In fact, the demand has been so high, I've actually raised my prices 3 times.
You're kidding.
I kid you not. I can't believe you've been selling Wacko watches so cheap.
It's true. I haven't raised my prices in years. I suppose I could up my wholesale price and maybe even double my income.
At least, probably triple it.
While he has Mr. Wacko taking the bait, hook, line, and sinker, Gerald even proposes a very clever ad campaign, pitching the catchphrase, "Only a wacko doesn't own a wacko." This has Mr. Wacko's full attention. He's got his eye set on expanding his watch empire and pocketing the profits along the way. However, he realizes that he's down to his last few boxes of watches, and unfortunately, the factory won't be able to bring him another shipment until next month.
Gee, that's just too bad. You should have been smart like me and stockpiled your supply. I must have 30, 40 crates of watches.
30 or 40 crates? Hey, listen, kid. What do you say you sell me back some of those watches?
I don't know. Why should I sell my watches back to you when I can get triple the price on the street?
Come on, kid. You gotta do it. Please. I'll pay you double what you paid me.
Gerald thinks about it for a while, and after mulling it over, he stands up and shakes Mr. Wacko's hand, telling him that he's got himself a deal. Just like that, we cut on over to Gerald and Arnold returning to Gerald's house as he's counting all the money that he made selling these watches back to Mr. Wacko. As he contemplates what he's gonna do with the money, like clockwork, his dad opens the door, almost like he was awaiting his son's arrival.
Well, we have a few money matters to take care of.
Sure. What do you need?
Let's see here. There's the bill for your new phone line.
No problem.
The beeper.
Fine.
The bill for your fax machine.
Fine.
And your business cards.
Okay.
Good to see you learn the value of $1, son.
Arnold and Gerald sit on the stoop as Gerald reflects on how he just lost all of this money in one fell swoop. And, as luck would have it, his little sister Timberly walks up expecting $1 just like before, and lo and behold, Gerald ends up flat broke, and the episode comes to an end with him having no way to buy the blades that he desperately wanted. Now, there's 2 really huge factors here that contribute to just how morbid this one is. First of all, we have to acknowledge the fact that this episode is portraying a run-of-the-mill, scummy scam artist who's preying upon inner-city kids, getting them to agree to get more watches than they could ever sell, in an attempt to put them in debt to him. Or should I say, put their parents in debt to him. This right here is a classic tactic, and it has pyramid scheme written all over it. All of the children that this man preys upon getting sucked into this is kind of in the same vein of all those LuLaRoe consultants that essentially led the downfall of the predatory legging empire. These kids are baited in with promises of a lavish lifestyle and being self-starting salesmen, only to be forced into biting off more than they can chew. What's really awful about these companies is how they use messed up tactics to pull you in even deeper too. And we saw that plain as day in this episode. I mean, the whole golden circle of salespeople that Mr. Wacko told Gerald that he made it into? Yeah, that's not even a real thing. There's no golden circle. There's no group of elite salespeople. That golden circle that he's referring to is the target that he sees on you as he looks at you with his $ eyeballs. What's even more scummy about Mr. Wacko too is that it's not enough that he's just a scam artist, but this is only one of the scams that he's pushing. During that scene where we see Mr. Wacko for the first time, if you pay attention to the background, you'll see a massive pile of likely drop-shipped Wacko branded nonsense in his office. I see Wacko surf wax, X-ray glasses, cold press lard, sea monkeys, and all sorts of other random gimmicky junk that he's peddling. It's plain as day that Mr. Wacko clearly just runs a company where he puts his name on cheap junk and turns around selling it at an extreme markup, claiming quality that he himself doesn't necessarily have the responsibility to claim, and hiring children to do the dirty work for him because a lot of people have a hard time saying no to kids. Especially other people's kids. Like, this despicable piece of garbage even went as far as having business cards made with Gerald's name and phone number on them, all without even getting his parents' consent. We can argue all day long that Gerald got his new phone line and everything himself, but come on. Take one look at this card. Gerald didn't design these Wacko branded business cards himself. There's absolutely no way. These were designed by Mr. Wacko, and I mean, I'm sure he sold these to Gerald at a markup too. It's all just so much scummy, manipulative behavior on behalf of Mr. Wacko, and it makes it all that much sweeter when he finally gets what he deserves in the end. Seeing Gerald turn around and bait Mr. Wacko back into buying these watches was just such a sweet moment. Speaking of Gerald though, that brings me to the other big factor that led to this one being so morbid. We all know that Gerald is a real go-getter. This kid is a slick talker and it shined bright as day through his sales tactics. He didn't have to be this scummy, shady salesman. He was able to just naturally use his self-starter work ethic and his charming charisma, and the watches basically sold themselves. Now, my big issue here is that Gerald approached all of this in a positive way, and ultimately there was no positive lesson for him to learn. I mean, zooming out to the bigger picture, there was something that Gerald wanted. So what did he do? He got a job to afford the thing he wanted. He even jumped through extra hoops, getting his dad to agree to co-sign. From there, he worked all around town selling watches. He sold watches on the bus, he sold them to his family. Gerald got on that grind and it paid off. However, it wasn't long until the well had run dry, and he learned just how quickly good things like this can come and go. In the long run, he ended up in debt, having just made enough money to pay it off, and not really have a single penny left over to put towards the thing that he actually wanted all along. I mean, this 9-year-old full-blown experienced the entire life of some people's careers in the course of like 2 weeks. So many of us have worked in industries where, as the world changes, our profession pretty much goes extinct. We lose our entire income without any choice in the matter. As far as Gerald goes, in his case, it was a matter of running out of people to sell to. Essentially, it resulted in him losing his income without any choice in the matter. No matter how happily he approached people looking to sell, there was simply no one else to sell to. This right here shows how sometimes in life, no matter how positive you are, there is never a positive outcome or positive lesson to learn. Like, there was no world where Gerald working for a guy like Mr. Wacko was going to be a long-standing economical career choice for him, or even any short-term game, unless you count the arcade games he got to play and the ice cream that he bought for everyone. Though it is a lesson very rooted in real life, it's very morbid for this kid to learn that nevertheless. Gerald learned a lesson that a lot of us don't end up learning until a lot later in life. I mean, so many of us enter the workforce bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, feeling optimistic about growing within our role at whatever company we're in. After time, that spark is usually dulled. Gerald, on the other hand, got his bright-eyed and bushy-tailed time out of the way when he was 9. I mean, in all reality, this episode basically showed him that you can work hard and have a good attitude, and the world will still tell you to go screw yourself. Like we talked about earlier, Gerald just has so many layers to him, and we've certainly seen that over the last 8 episodes that we've checked out. Whether it be growing his friendship with Arnold, trying to come to terms with his family life, or trying to overcome the struggles of just being a student at PS 118, it's shown that he's a character who can face hardship time and time again, yet always find a way to come out on top. Or, at minimum, break even like we saw at the end of the last episode. We've covered his growth as a character, the different aspects of his personality, his friend group, and even his potential love interests. However, if there were one final thing that I really wanted to touch on before we wrap things up, it would be fuzzy slippers. Throughout the series, we would hear Gerald reference fuzzy slippers a few times, usually in the context of him being the person that would give him information about stuff. There's a ton of fan theories out there about who Fuzzy Slipper is, and, well, if you made it this far into the video, you deserve a little teaser. I totally want to make a video soon about Fuzzy Slippers and my theories as to who he could be. In approaching this video though, I find myself frustrated because, much like Gerald's relationship with Phoebe not having a specific episode that we could talk about because it's implied throughout the series subtly, there isn't really an episode that explores Fuzzy Slippers and his role in Gerald's life and who he could possibly be. It's another one of those where he's just referenced a few times here and there. With that being said though, the episodes that do reference Fuzzy Slippers aren't really about Gerald, so it would feel very out of place tackling that subject now. What I do find interesting, however, is that we just looked at 8 solid episodes that mostly revolved around Gerald, and there was only one single reference to Fuzzy Slippers that, if you didn't look closely, you probably missed. I'd be willing to bet that you definitely missed it. As a matter of fact, this might not even be a reference to him. It came from the episode Gerald Moves Out. During that scene where we see Gerald going to drop off his laundry and Mr. Wynn shows him the list of rules for the washing machine, there's just this whole list of obscene, bizarre rules like no riding inside of the washer without an adult or no standing in your birthday suit while you wait. But also, one specific rule caught my eye. Do not wash fuzzy slippers. Now, this could be a specific rule made for a reason. However, if we keep in mind that Fuzzy Slippers was first mentioned in Season 1, and this episode is from Season 2, I mean, he's already an established character by this point. With this being a Gerald-focused episode, yeah, this very well could be a reference to the Fuzzy Slippers. However, nothing outside of that one possible oddball reference pertained to Fuzzy Slippers whatsoever. As far as Gerald is concerned though, I feel like there is so much to his character that attributes to him being such an integral part of this show. The biggest of which though for me personally is how excellently he acts as the yin to Arnold's yang. I mean, as a dude, these guys are straight up friendship goals. I strive to have a best friendship like Arnold and Gerald have, and all things considered, I really appreciate Gerald for the many different positive aspects that he brings to this show. But on that note, I would love to hear what you guys think. What's your favorite Gerald moment? Let me know in the comments down below. I always love seeing your guys' feedback. Of course, I have to give a huge shout out to my true 90s kids. None of this would even be possible without you guys, and I truly appreciate every single one of you. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to drop a like and stick around for another one. As always, thank you all so much for watching, and I can't wait to see you all in the next one. Peace.